Welcome, dear listener, to the empty boat. You've come to a quiet place, a place not of answers, but of still questions, not of noise, but of presence. Here, nothing is rushed, and nothing needs to be perfect. Perhaps you've been carrying a burden. Perhaps the world has been loud and heavy. Or perhaps, like an empty boat drifting in the mist, you've simply arrived without knowing why. Whatever brought you here, welcome. This space was made for you. In the stories you're about to hear, you won't find sermons or commands. Instead, you'll find whispers from bamboo groves, ancient monasteries, forgotten hills, and from the quiet corners of your own heart. Each tale is a small flame, lit not to dazzle, but to warm. Each silence between the words, bell you can only hear when you close your eyes, and breathe. Let the world slow down. Let your thoughts settle like sand in still water. Let your breath come home to you. And now, with a soft heart and an open mind, we begin the first of 25 Zen stories, stories for healing, awakening, and returning. Welcome, again, to the empty boat. Story 1. The bamboo that bent for the empty boat Zen collection. There was a temple deep in the mountains, far from any village, where the mist lingered until late morning, and the wind whispered through groves of ancient bamboo. In that temple lived an old Zen master named Ryo. His presence was quiet, like the mountain fog, never demanding attention, but always felt. Every morning, long before the sun peeked over the ridge, Ryerson would sweep the stone courtyard, not just for cleanliness, but for clarity. He believed that the act of sweeping removed not only leaves, but also the dust of the mind. One morning, a young man arrived, soaked from the rain, with eyes full of defiance and fists clenched at his sides. His name was Kato, a boy from the coastal town below who had lost his father in a recent storm. The sea had taken him suddenly, mercilessly, and left behind a mother too silent and a house too empty. Kato had heard of Ryerson through the stories his father used to tell. The master who listens more than he speaks, his father once said. The one who lives with the bamboo and learns from their silence. With nowhere else to go, Kato climbed the mountain, seeking not wisdom but refuge. And perhaps, somewhere, deep inside, a confrontation. Ryerson welcomed him without questions. No sermon, no initiation, just a bowl of hot rice and a place by the hearth. For 3 days, Kato spoke not a word. He watched Ryerson in the garden, pruning bonsai trees, sweeping leaves, boiling tea. Everything was done with a kind of slowness that infuriated the boy. Finally, one morning, Kato burst. "Why do you do nothing?" he demanded. "Why do you just sit and sweep and trim branches while the world burns? My father is dead. My mother barely speaks, and you're here, playing with leaves." Ryerson didn't look up. He gently placed a clipped branch into a pile. "The bamboo bends," he said, "but it does not break." Kato scoffed. "What does that even mean?" Ryerson motioned for the boy to follow. They walked into the grove behind the temple, where tall bamboo stalks swayed with the wind. The sky had darkened again. Another storm was coming. "Watch," Ryerson said. And then came the wind. It howled through the forest like an uninvited ghost, shaking the trees and pushing the bamboo down nearly to the ground. Yet none of them snapped. They leaned, creaked, danced with the storm, and when it passed, they stood again, as if nothing had happened. "Do you know why the bamboo survives?" Ryerson asked. Kato shook his head. "Because it does not fight the wind. It yields." The boy turned away, frustrated. So we're just supposed to yield to everything. Let pain happen. Let life take what it wants. Ryerson was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, to yield is not to give up. It is to remain. In the days that followed, Cato began to assist in the temple's chores, not out of devotion, but restlessness. He chopped wood too loudly, fetched water too quickly, and burned the rice more than once. But Ryerson never scolded. Instead, he gave Cato more tasks, not to punish him, but to involve him in rhythm. One afternoon, Ryerson handed him a cracked pot to carry water from the spring. "This is broken," Cato said. Ryerson smiled. "Use it anyway." Cato obeyed, but grumbled the entire way. By the time he reached the temple, half the water had leaked out. "I told you it was useless," he snapped. Ryerson motioned for him to walk back the same path. Look, along the trail, tiny green shoots had begun to grow sprouts, nurtured by the leaking water. "You see," the master said, "even what is cracked can still nourish life." That night, Cato couldn't sleep. The storm came in full force. Rain pounded the roof. Trees bent dangerously outside. And Cato, lying awake, remembered the bamboo. Their silence, their sway, he wondered, suddenly. If all his anger was his attempt to stand firm against a wind that could never be stopped. Zen reflection, this story, though simple in form, carries the heart of Zen teaching. In the teachings of the Buddha, clinging is the root of suffering. When we grasp tightly to how we think life should be, our expectations, our roles, our control, we become like the rigid tree in a storm. Eventually, we snap. But the bamboo survives because it yields. It does not resist. The wind, it moves with it, knowing the storm will pass. As Ryerson teaches Cato, yielding is not weakness, it is resilience. To remain supple, to stay rooted even when benthis is the quiet strength Zen speaks of. The Buddha said, when the mind is flexible, it is free. When it is rigid, it suffers. Modern psychology, connection in contemporary psychology, particularly in the context of trauma and grief, the ability to adapt is what allows healing. This is known as psychological flexibility. Individuals who resist pain, who suppress it, deny it, or fight it often prolong their suffering. In contrast, those who accept pain as part of their experience are more likely to process it healthily. Acceptance does not mean agreement. Just as Ryerson did not approve of the storm that took Cato's father, neither does therapy ask us to like our losses. Rather, we learn to coexist with them. We integrate pain into our story, not as a permanent wound, but as a crack through which light can eventually enter. The cracked pot is a metaphor for our perceived flaws, our past mistakes, or broken places. Yet even these can serve, can nurture, can contribute when we allow them. When Cato learns to slow down, when he witnesses how the bamboo lives in harmony with change, his nervous system begins to regulate. He shifts from a fight-or-flight response into something deeper. Restoration, the storm remains outside, but peace begins within. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. As you prepare to sleep, ask yourself gently, where in your life are you trying to stand too firm? What wind are you resisting so strongly that it's wearing you down? Is it a loss, a betrayal, a disappointment you never allowed yourself to feel? Take a breath, let it out slowly. Imagine yourself as bamboo, deeply but free to sway. Let your chest soften, let your shoulders drop. Nothing needs to be solved tonight, only witnessed, only allowed. As the Buddha once taught, you can only lose what you cling to. And so we begin the practice of letting go, not all at once. But, with each breath, tomorrow you may still grieve, you may still long, but perhaps you will also begin to bend, and you will not break. Story 2. The Bell That Rang in Silence for the Empty Boat Zen Collection **. At the edge of a forgotten village stood a weathered temple with no monks and only one inhabitant, a woman named Ame. She had once been a nun. Long ago, but now, simply lived among the moss and quiet, tending the garden, mending the roof, boiling tea for no guests. The temple was said to hold a sacred bell cast from the finest bronze centuries ago, but it never rang, not once. Generations came and went, seasons passed, and still the bell remained silent, suspended in the central hall like an unanswered question. People told stories. Some said the bell could only ring for those who had no desire to hear it. Others claimed the sound was so pure it would echo only in the soul. Children would sneak into the temple courtyard, daring each other to strike it. But when they did nothing, no sound, just the heavy silence of old stone and the soft rustle of leaves. Ame never explained it. She would smile when asked, but say nothing. And so the villagers left her and the silent bell alone, until one day a man arrived. His name was Ichiro, and he was a renowned teacher of sounder, master of instruments, chimes, and resonance. He had studied in temples across the mountains, cities, and islands. Wherever there was music, he had listened deeply. But now, nearing the end of his life, he had heard of the silent bell and felt compelled to understand it. He came not with arrogance, but reverence. When he entered the temple, he bowed deeply to Ame, and she returned the gesture without words. "I've come to listen," he said. She led him to the bell. It was magnificent, tall as a man, etched with lotus petals, and clouds, worn by time but dignified. It hung from a great wooden beam. A mallet rested beside it. Ichiro bowed again and stepped closer. He examined the metal, the suspension, the angle. He tapped gently, no sound. He tried again, more firmly, still silence. He pressed his ear against the surface. It was cold, still, watched him, her hands tucked into her sleeves. "It doesn't want to ring," he said softly. "No," she replied. "It does ring." He looked at her, confused. In silence, she said. Ichiro furrowed his brow. "Is that metaphor?" Ame shook her head. "It is practice." That night, Ichiro stayed in the guest room. The temple was quiet, no chants, no gongs, no visitors. Just the wind and the breath of the earth. At dawn, he awoke to find Ame sitting in zazen by the bell, eyes closed, back straight, utterly still. He joined her, unsure. Time passed, he did not know how much. When he finally opened his eyes, Ame was gone, but the feeling remained, as if something had been heard, though no sound had been made. He began to return each morning. He sat in silence beside the bell. He stopped trying to strike it. He listened not for sound, but for the space in which sound might be born. After 7 days, something shifted. It wasn't the bell that changed, but Ichiro. The silence began to deepen. It was no longer absence, but presence, a kind of fullness beyond notes and pitch. He felt it inside him, beneath his ribs, between his thoughts, in the hush before a tear falls. On the 9th day, he turned to Ame. "I think I heard it." She nodded gently, and he wept not because of what he heard, but because of what he no longer needed. Zen, reflection and Zen. There is a phrase. Listen to the sound of one hand clapping. To the logical mind, this is nonsense. But Zen does not aim for logic, it aims for presence. The story of the bell that rings in silence is a teaching in true listening. True listening is not to the outer world, but the inner. Not to the notes, but to the space between them. Not to the bell, but to the one who hears. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, it is said, "The silence of the sage is thunderous." This silence is not passive, it is alive. It reveals a may, like many. Zen teachers offered no explanation. She did not seek to convince. She lived her teaching. Her bell was real, but its sound was not of the ears, it was of the heart. Modern psychology, connection in psychotherapy and trauma work. Silence is not. The absence of communication, it is a mirror. A therapist may sit in stillness while a client searches for words. That pause, that sacred gap, often brings forth truths no question could touch. In a world dominated by alerts, demands, chatter, our nervous systems are overstimulated. Silence becomes uncomfortable, even threatening. But it is in silence that integration happens. The brain rests. The body recalibrates. Ichiro, the master of sound, came with knowledge. But it was only when he stopped seeking, when he surrendered to stillness, that he accessed a deeper wisdom in somatic experiencing. A therapy for trauma, clients are taught to feel their bodies in silence, to track sensations without words. Healing occurs not through explanation, but through embodied presence. Likewise, the bell that rang in silence is a symbol of this deep, non-verbal knowing. It teaches that not all truths are loud. Some arrive when we are quiet enough to receive them. Closing reflection and meditation prompt a night. In the hush before sleep, sit still for a moment. You do not need music. You do not need answers. Simply listen. Listen not with your ears, but with your breath. Feel the silence like a warm blanket around you. Let your heartbeat be the drum. Let your lungs be the flute. Let your soul be the bell, and ask yourself, when was the last time you truly listened, not to speak, not to solve, but to understand? What silence have you been afraid to hear? As you breathe in, know this: you are allowed to be still. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to hear the bell that rings within you. As the Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. And sometimes that word is not a word at all. It is silence. Story 3. The Old Monk and the Angry Boy for the Empty Boat, Zen Collection. It was late summer when the boy arrived at the monastery gate, eyes burning with the fire of something no one had taught him to name. He stood barefoot on the hot stones, fists clenched, mouth set in a tight line. The monks tending the garden looked up, surprised to see a child with such a storm behind his eyes. "I want to see the master," he said. The monks exchanged glances. One of them approached, gently. "And who might you be, young one?" "I'm Renji," the boy replied, "and I'm angry." There was silence for a moment. Then a quiet voice answered from behind the camellia bush. "Good," it said. "Let your anger bring you in." The voice belonged to Master Guinan, the eldest monk in the temple, known for walking slower than the river and speaking only when the silence had said enough. He was small and weathered like driftwood, with eyes that shimmered like light on a still pond. He led the boy into the temple garden without another word. For 3 days, Renji stayed at the temple. He refused to bow. He refused to chant. He refused to help with the chores. He watched the other monks with narrowed eyes, his fury as present as the midday sun. When asked questions, he gave no answers. When invited to share tea, he turned away. But Master Guinan said nothing. Instead, each morning, he asked Renji one question. "Where does it hurt today?" The boy didn't answer. On the fourth day, Guinan invited him to walk up the mountain trail. They climbed in silence, passing pine trees and prayer flags that fluttered like the breath of the mountain itself. At the summit, the old monk sat down. On a flat rock, he pointed to the valley below. "Do you see that village?" Renji nodded. "That's where I once lived," the monk said, "and that's where I learned to burn." Renji looked at him. "I had your anger once," Guinan said. "It lived in my hands. It boiled in my stomach. I thought if I could shout loud enough, hit hard enough, I would stop the pain." "What pain?" Renji asked. The first words he'd spoken since arriving. "The pain of not being heard." Jinon said, "Of not being loved as I was." Renji was quiet. His lips trembled, just slightly. Jinon continued, "I burned everything. Friendships, trust, peace, and the fire never made me warm. Only empty." The old monk reached into his robe and pulled out a small, smooth stone. "Take this," he said, handing it to the boy. "It has lived on this mountain for 1,000 years. Try to throw it as far as your anger wants." Renji hurled it with all his might. It didn't go far, just tumbled down the slope and stopped. "Again," Guinan said, giving him another. Renji threw harder. Again, the stone fell, rolled, stopped. A third time, and a fourth. Finally, Renji sat down, panting. "I can't make it go any farther." He growled. Jinan nodded. "Anger feels like power, but it only travels as far as the strength behind it, and strength fades." He looked at the boy. "Now sit. Let us see what remains when the fire cools." That night, Renji wept. He wept for his mother, who had died in childbirth. He wept for his father, who drank to forget. He wept for the fists he had thrown, the doors he had slammed, the nights he had screamed into his pillow. Master Guinan sat beside him in silence, not fixing, not judging, just breathing by dawn. Renji had fallen asleep with his head on the monk's lap, the mountain winds easing through the trees like lullabies. The next morning, when asked again, "Where does it hurt today?" Renji answered, "My chest," but softer than before. Zen reflectioning the teachings of the Buddha. Kridanga is often likened to holding a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at someone. But who burns first? Zen does not deny anger. It does not label it wrong. Instead, it invites us to see through it, to understand it as a messenger, not a master. Master Jinan did not scold Renji. He did not attempt to extinguish the fire by force. Instead, he offered space, time, a presence that did not fear the flame. This is the heart of Zen compassion, to hold space for suffering without trying to fix it, to listen without the urgency to speak, to let the storm pass on its own. The Buddha said, "Conquer the angry man by love, conquer the ill-natured by goodness, conquer the miser with generosity, and the liar with truth." Dhammapada 220. Anger, when seen with the eyes of wisdom, is not the enemy. It is a doorway to grief, unmet needs, forgotten wounds. And through that doorway, if we walk gently, we may find healing. Modern psychology, connection, and trauma-informed therapy. Anger is often understood as a secondary emotion, a cover for something deeper. Sadness, fear, shame, or helplessness. Children, like Renji, who experienced neglect, loss, or violence, often adopt anger as armor. It gives the illusion of control, of being seen, of not being weak. But underneath that anger lies a deeper longing to be held, to be understood, to be safe. Master Guinan's approach mirrors what modern clinicians call co-regulation, the process by which a calm, attuned nervous system helps another dysregulated system return to balance. He didn't confront or correct Renji's rage. He simply stayed present, free embodied stillness. The exercise with the stones is a symbolic practice. In cognitive behavioral therapy, externalizing anger into physical action, like hitting a pillow or throwing safely, is sometimes used. But Zen adds another layer: awareness, not just expression, but reflection. Not just release, but recognition. When the strength behind anger fades, what remains? For many, as with Renji, it is sorrow. And from sorrow can emerge truth. And from truth compassion. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. Ask yourself, where in your life is anger trying to speak for something deeper? What unspoken sadness is wearing the mask of rage? What part of you is crying out to be held? Close your eyes. Breathe in through the nose, slowly. Hold for a moment. Exhale softly, as if blowing on a flame just enough to keep it alive, not enough to spread it. Imagine your anger as a child sitting beside you, not to be punished, not to be silenced, just seen. Say to it, I see you. I hear the pain behind your fire. You are safe now. Repeat until you feel your chest soften. Let the coals cool. Let the breath deepen. Let the monk within you sit beside the boy you once were. As the Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred. Hatred ceases by love. This is an eternal law. You need not suppress the fire, but you do not need to feed it either. You can hold it, you can breathe with it, and still, you can choose peace. Story 4. The man who chased the horizon for the empty boat Zen collection. There once lived a man named Daisuke, who was known across the provinces, not for his wealth or wisdom, but for his restless feet. From the moment he could walk, he walked away. From towns to temples, markets to mountains, he was always on the move, as if something in the distance whispered his name and refused to let him rest. When he was still a child, his mother told him bedtime stories about a mythical land where the sun never set, where sorrow did not visit, where one could drink from the spring of joy and never thirst again. As he grew older, he stopped believing in the magic of it, but not in the longing it left behind. He came to call it the horizon. Wherever he was certain happiness lay just a little farther ahead. A new city, a new lover, a new teaching. Always out there, never here. And so he wandered. He studied under famous teachers, yet never stayed long enough to absorb. He sat in temples, but grew impatient with the silence. He climbed peaks only to leave before sunrise. He loved women, but always left before he could be loved back. People began to call him the Horizon Man, not in mockery, but in wonder. There was something noble, even beautiful, about a person who refused to settle for less than bliss. But Daisuke was not happy. He was exhausted one day, after many years of walking and longing and searching. His legs gave way beneath him in a field of autumn grass. The sky above him was vast, the wind cold, and he realized he had no idea where he was. He laughed a brittle, painful sound. Even now, he whispered, I do not know where I am. An old farmer, passing nearby, saw him and offered him water. Daisuke accepted without pride. You look like you've been walking for many years, the farmer said. A lifetime, Daisuk replied. Did you find what you were looking for? Daisuk shook his head. Then maybe it's time, the farmer said, to stop running toward the horizon and sit long enough to see what's already blooming under your feet. Daisuke closed his eyes, and for the first time in memory, he did not feel the urge to move. He stayed the night in the farmer's barn. In the morning, he helped gather wood. In the evening, he helped repair the roof. The sky was still vast, the wind still sharp, but the ache in his chest felt quieter. He stayed another night, and then another. Eventually, the old farmer said, "There's a Zen master who lives at the foot of the Blue Hills. He speaks little, but listens well. If you want to speak of your travels, he will not interrupt." And so Daisuke went, not out of longing, but out of readiness. Master. Genjo lived in a tiny hermitage beside a dry creek bed. He was thin, almost transparent in presence, like someone halfway between this world and the next. Daisuke bowed low. "I have chased the horizon all my life," he said. "I've gone farther than most. I've studied scriptures, tasted pleasure, suffered cold, heard 1,000 teachings, and still I remain empty." The master said nothing. He gestured for Daisuke to sit. They sat for hours. No questions, no answers, only breath and the distant sound of wind through bare trees at dusk. Genjo finally spoke. "You have not been chasing the horizon," he said. "You have been running from the present." Daisuke felt something crack open inside him. "I don't know how to stop," he confessed. The master reached beside him and picked up a small cup. "When you pour water into a cracked bowl, it escapes," he said. "No matter how much you pour, it is never full. You think the problem is not having enough, but it is the bowl." He looked at Daisuke. "You have mistaken movement for meaning." For weeks, Daisuke stayed with the master. He learned to chop vegetables without rushing, to breathe through the pain in his knees while sitting, to listen to the birds not as signs, but as songs. He still dreamed of the horizon sometimes, but now it arrived not as longing, but as poetry. One morning, he swept the stone path and found a single camellia blossom resting on the ground, fallen silently in the night. Its petals were still bright, still open, even in death. He wept, not from sorrow, but from the recognition that something had finally arrived within. He did not need to go farther. He was home. Zen reflection, this is a story. For those who are always searching, for those who think the next experience, the next teacher, the next breakthrough will bring them peace. Zen has a word for this. Ushina, heart divided, constantly turning outward, never resting. It is the hunger that no meal satisfies, because the ache is not in the stomach but in the mind. The horizon man is all of us who confuse motion for transformation, who believe that enlightenment lies in another place, another time. But in Zen, teaching is simple. Wherever you are, be there fully. The horizon is an illusion. You never arrive at it. It always moves as you move. But the present is moment, this breath is real. It is the only place where awakening is possible. As the Buddha said, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. Master Genjo's teaching is not about stillness versus movement. It is about presence. Whether walking or sitting, speaking or silent, the question is, are you here? If not, where are you? And who are you chasing? Modern psychology, connection in psychology. The phenomenon Daisuke represents is known as destination addiction. The idea that happiness is always in the next place, the next goal, the next achievement. It is a subtle but powerful form of avoidance. By staying busy, always moving, individuals can avoid confronting painful emotions, unresolved grief, or deep existential questions. But as therapists often remind clients, wherever you go, there you are. Chronic busyness, excessive travel, serial relationships, compulsive self-improvement all can mask a deeper lack of connection to the present self. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy (MBCT) and acceptance and commitment therapy (ACT) emphasize grounded presence. These approaches teach individuals to witness thoughts and urges without becoming them, to allow discomfort without fleeing from it. In neuroscience, the default mode network, the part of the brain active during daydreaming and self-referential thought, tends to quiet during mindfulness meditation. The constant story of what's next is interrupted. The brain and the person finally rests. For someone like Daisuk, the true turning point is not external, it's internal. When he allows himself to sit, to feel, to stay, only then does integration begin. Closing reflection and meditation prompt us. You lie in bed tonight. Ask gently, what are you chasing? What part of you believes peace is always somewhere else? What would it feel like to stop even for a breath and let this moment be enough? Close your eyes. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Exhale through your mouth, as if sighing. Feel the weight of the bed beneath you. Feel your chest rise and fall. Feel the present, not as an idea, but as a sensation. Now whisper inwardly, I do not need to go farther to come home. You may still long, you may still dream, but know this, the horizon is not ahead. It is here, in this breath, in this silence, in this surrender, as the Buddha taught. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are exactly where you are meant to begin, here, now. Story 5. The Cracked Bowl for the Empty Boat Zen Collection. A small village nestled beside a slow-moving river. There lived an old woman named Nami. She had white hair like silk thread and hands weathered by years of washing clothes, grinding rice, and holding grief. Her house was simple wooden, creaky, and always smelling of warm tea and old paper. Nami had one possession she loved more than any other, a clay bowl with a crack running down its side. It was not valuable, not rare. In fact, many had told her to throw it away, but she never did. Every morning, she would boil water and pour tea into that bowl, and every evening, she would rinse it gently and place it on the windowsill to dry in the sun. People asked why she didn't use one of the newer bowls she owned. She would only smile and say, "This one listens best." No one quite understood. One day, a young man named Haru came to the village from the city. He was a scholar who had lost his way to many books, to many expectations, too much shame over the things he couldn't control, burnt out and brittle. He came to the countryside hoping to disappear for a while. He rented a small room near Nomi's home. Each morning he would pass by and see her sipping tea from that cracked bowl, eyes half closed, as if listening to something deeper than birdsong. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him. "Excuse me, madam," he said one morning. "May I ask why do you use a broken bowl?" Nami looked up, the corner of her mouth curling slightly. She motioned for him to sit without speaking. She poured him tea, a flawless cup. She poured her own into the cracked bowl. As she drank, a tiny trickle of tea escaped the fissure, trailing down the side and into her palm. I drink with both hands, she said. Har. You looked confused. She smiled again, gently. One to hold the tea, one to hold the loss. Haru began visiting her. Daily, at first, he asked polite questions. About the village, the weather, the best way to plant daikon. But over time, the questions changed. Why do I always feel not enough? Why does success feel like sand in my mouth? Why can't I forgive myself for the things I didn't become? Nami never answered directly. Instead, she told him stories of trees that dropped their leaves so they wouldn't break under snow, of rivers that changed course after storms, of monks who wept into their rice bowls at night and still woke before dawn to chant. One afternoon, she placed the cracked bowl before him and said, "This was given to me by my husband. Before the war, he never came back. I kept it, and one day it cracked. I thought of throwing it away, but instead I decided to pour tea into it every day." Haru looked at her, eyes glistening. "But it leaks," he said. She nodded, "Yes, and still it holds." He stayed silent for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you think I'm broken?" She looked at him gently and said, "No, I think you were poured into the wrong bowl." That night, Haru didn't sleep. He sat on the floor of his rented room, surrounded by pages and pages of unfinished manuscripts, degrees that now felt like weights, journal entries filled with lines of self-criticism highlighted in red. He burned them in the small stone hearth, one by one, not in anger but in offering. Then he sat in silence, and he wept, not because he was broken, but because, for the first time, he believed he could be Holovan with the crack. Zen reflection, this is a story of what we discard too easily, of the parts of ourselves we are taught to hide, to fix, to erase. The cracked bowl is a metaphor for woundedness, but also for beauty that survives. In Zen, there is a Japanese art called kintsugi, the mending of broken pottery with gold, not to hide the crack, but to honor it, to illuminate the fracture, making it part of the design. The bowl is more precious because it was broken. The Buddha taught, just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame. Dhammapada 81. But what if the rock itself is cracked? Then it becomes shelter, a place where moss grows, a home for life. Zen does not demand perfection, it invites wholeness, and wholeness includes the scar. Modern psychology, connection in trauma, and healing work. There is a crucial distinction between being damaged and being transformed. Woundedness is not the end of the story. In fact, it is often the doorway to meaning, to empathy, to wisdom. This is what Carl Jung referred to as the wounded healer, the one who through their own pain becomes capable of deep compassion. Post-traumatic growth is a concept that recognizes how people can experience positive psychological change after surviving hardship, not despite the wound, but because of it. Nomi's cracked bowl reflects radical acceptance, a term from dialectical behavior therapy, DB. It's the practice of fully accepting reality as it is, rather than resisting or denying it. Her love for the bowl does not depend on its wholeness. It depends on its presence, on what it holds and how it holds. For Haru, his healing begins not when he is told he is enough, but when he sees that even the cracked parts of him have purpose. His shame dissolves, not through achievement, but through being witnessed by someone who does not flinch. In therapeutic terms, this is compassionate mirroring, the healing gaze that reflects worth, even when the person cannot yet see it in themselves. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. As the quiet settles around you, ask, what part of me have I tried to throw away? What crack do I hide from others or from myself? Now place your hands gently over your heart. Breathe in through your nose, counting to 4. Hold for a moment. Exhale slowly, as if exhaling grief. Imagine the cracked bowl inside you, not as a flaw, but as a vessel for the light. Whisper to yourself, I hold, I spill, and I am still enough. As the Buddha taught, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. You need not be flawless. You need not leak nothing. You only need to be here and to listen like the old bowl until the tea of life fills you again. Story 6. The Woman and the Unsent Letter for the Empty Boat Zen Collection in a city of lanterns and river mist, where the roofs sloped like resting wings and the evenings smelled of ink and sandalwood. There lived a woman named Hannah. She was a calligrapher, one of the best. Her brushstrokes were so fluid, people said she could write the word emptiness in a way that made them feel full. Her work was commissioned for temples, weddings, even funerals. But no one knew where she lived or what she looked like. She never came to the ceremonies. Her scrolls always arrived wrapped in mulberry paper, tied with red silk, delivered by quiet hands. Hannah had not left her house in 17 years. Her world was a single room, overlooking a narrow alley and a plum tree that bloomed only every few winters. She lived in silence, except for the rustle of paper, the whistle of boiling water, and the occasional knock at her door. She had once loved someone deeply, but that was long ago. His name was Kento, a teacher from the northern provinces who had studied poetry and dreamed of building a school for orphans. They had met by chance under the falling cherry blossoms, and shared 4 seasons together. Laughter, tea, letters that stretched into the night, and then, one day, he was gone. No word, no letter, no goodbye. At first, Hannah waited. Then she wondered. Then she shattered. For months, she didn't eat. She didn't write. Her hair grew long and wild, her nails stained with ink she never used. Friends came, knocked, left gifts, but she opened the door to no one. Finally, she returned to her desk. But she no longer wrote for temples. She began to write letters, all of them addressed to him, none of them sent. Each day she wrote 1, sometimes 3, sometimes the same letter over and over, changing only a word. She poured her longing onto rice paper, letting her brush bleed her grief into elegant lines. She kept the letters in a wooden box by her bed. 17 years, over 6,000 unsent letters. Then one morning, a boy knocked at her door. She didn't answer. He returned the next day, and the next. On the 4th day, he slid a folded note under the door. I know you don't open the door, but I want to learn how to write like you, even if I never see you. Please leave a lesson by the step if you're willing. Hannah, read it, without moving. She almost burned it. But instead, the next morning, she left a sheet of parchment with a single phrase. Before the brush moves, the breath must arrive. The boy returned with another note. Thus began a quiet exchange. No faces, only ink. She left scrolls. He left questions. She wrote riddles. He answered with drawings. Over time, his characters grew steadier, his lines more honest, less forced. More lived. Weeks passed, then months. One day he asked, "Why do you never write your own name?" She didn't reply, but that night she sat before her wooden box and opened it. Inside were years of sorrow, some pages yellowed, some smudged by tears, some so delicate they trembled in her hands. She chose one at random and read, "Kento, today I saw a dog that looked like the one we fed soba to in spring. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Another, I waited for you again today. I hated myself for it. Another, I have begun to forget your face. I hate myself. That, too, and another. Did you love me, even for a moment?" She sat for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, she took a clean sheet of paper, and she wrote, "Today I forgive you for not writing back." She folded it, placed it in the box. Then she stood, opened her window, and for the first time in 17 years, she let the wind carry a letter away. Zen reflection, this story is about the things we do not say, the grief we carry in silence, the letters we write but never send, the love we give that never returns. In Zen, silence is not absence, it is a vessel. Hannah's letters are both her prison and her practice. She writes not to communicate, but to survive. The brush becomes her breath, the page, her mirror. Her refusal to send is not cowardice, it is ritual. A way to honor pain without losing herself to it. But even rituals must end when they become walls. The Buddha taught. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Likewise, unspoken grief is not inert. It grows roots. It hardens. It isolates. The unsent letter is a metaphor for all the unresolved conversations within us, the apologies never received, the explanations never given, the partings that lacked closure. Zen invites us not to chase those answers, but to be with the ache they leave behind, not to erase the longing, but to hold it gently, like Hannah's folded papers. Forgiveness is not always loud. Sometimes it is a letter sent only to the wind. Modern psychology, connection, resolved loss, also known as ambiguous grief, was one of the most difficult forms of emotional pain. It occurs when closure is not possible, such as in cases of abandonment, sudden disappearance, or unanswered love. Hannah's behavior reflects a common therapeutic expression, writing unsent letters. In many trauma-informed therapies, patients are encouraged to write to those who hurt them, not to send, but to give shape to feelings, too tangled to hold silently. This practice allows the emotional brain to externalize what is otherwise looping. Internally, it gives grief a boundary, a container. But when this ritual becomes prolonged over years, as with Hermit, can create what psychologists call stuck mourning. The pain no longer moves. It becomes identity. Healing begins when we allow for new symbols. In Hannah's case, it is the boy, a quiet student. A new kind of relationship, not romantic, not dramatic, just present. His arrival offers her a mirror, a connection that does not ask her to forget the past, but to return to the living. Her final letter is not for Kento, it is for herself. In Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, ACT, the idea is not to erase painful thoughts, but to accept them, make room for them, and then choose action based on values. Hannah values truth, beauty, and connection. Her decision to release a letter is the first committed act toward reintegration. The crack in her life remains, but through that crack light enters. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. As you lie in the stillness of your own room, ask, what letter have I never sent? What words have I held inside for too long? Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Feel the silence between your ribs. Feel the pulse of memory. Let an image come, a person, a moment, a page never turned. Now imagine writing not to accuse, not to beg, but simply to express. Write in your heart. Today I release what has been kept too long. Let it rise like incense. Let it drift away as the Buddha taught. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. So too with longing. So too with silence. You may never get the answer you wanted. You may never know why they left. But you can still write the final word, and it can be peace. Story 7. The leaf that didn't fall. For the empty boat Zen collection. There was once a small tree at the edge of a Zen temple garden. It was a young maple, no taller than a child, and it stood quietly among larger pines and older stones that had known centuries of footsteps. The monks passed it each day without much notice, except when its leaves turned brilliant crimson in autumn. Then, even the most senior masters would pause to admire the flame of its offering. It was in this season that the novice monk Taro began to pay attention to the tree. He was 16, newly arrived, his head freshly shaved, his heart both heavy and hopeful. His parents had sent him to the temple not out of spiritual longing, but because they feared the path he was on in the city. Anger, recklessness, a hunger for something neither he nor they could name. At first, Taro resisted the silence. He missed the noise of neon lights, the chaos of his old world. The temple's discipline made him restless. He longed for answers, for impact, for change. But what he found were long walks in silence, sweeping leaves, and the quiet eyes of the old master, Daisen, who seemed to speak more with his breathing than his mouth. It was during his first autumn at the temple that Taro noticed a strange thing. Each morning, as he swept the stone path near the maple tree, more and more red leaves would fall softly, rhythmically, carpeting the ground in a blood-orange hush. But there was one leaf that clung. It was not the largest, nor the most central. In fact, it was slightly torn at the edge. And yet, while the others released their grip and floated down with grace, this one held fast. Day after day, wind after wind, it did not fall. Taro began to check it every morning, as if it had become his companion. "Why won't you let go?" he whispered one day. The next morning, after a long night of rain and wind, the ground was soaked and nearly bare, but the leaf still hung on, trembling, weary. Taro brought a stool and sat beneath the tree, staring at it. He thought of his father, who had said goodbye without turning round. He thought of the boy he had punched in anger, and the apology he never gave. He thought of his mother's silence the day he left. And then he understood. He too was a leaf that didn't want to fall. That evening, he went to Master Daisen, who was tending the moss with a wooden comb. "Why do some leaves fall easily?" Taro asked, "while others cling even when they are torn?" The old man looked up, his eyes soft but piercing, "Because some leaves do not yet trust the ground," he said. Taro looked confused. Daisen continued, "To fall is not to die. It is to become the earth again. But when a leaf believes that its only purpose is to remain attached, it fears release." The master set the comb down and gestured to the setting sun. "We are like that too. We cling to anger, to identities, to grief, to people, not because they still serve us, but because we fear what it means to fall away from them." Taro swallowed hard. "But how do I let go?" he asked. Daisen smiled gently. You do not force it. You learn to trust the falling. The next day, Taro sat again beneath the tree. He closed his eyes and listened, not to the wind, but to himself. He remembered how hard he had clung to the version of himself that fought, that proved, that never admitted fear. He realized how much of his pain was held in the grip, not the letting go. He opened his eyes and looked up. The leaf was gone. He didn't see it fall. He only saw that it had finally done so, in its own time, without spectacle. Taro smiled. He didn't need to know which one on the ground it was. It had returned to the earth. And so, perhaps, would he, Zen, reflection letting go, is one of the most misunderstood practices in spiritual life. It is often confused with giving up, with defeat, or with detachment born of coldness. But in Zen, letting go huraku's an act of trust. Trust that the ground will hold us. Trust that we are not only the leaf, but the tree, the wind, the soil, and the sky. Taro's journey is the journey of all who awaken. First comes the noticing, the awareness that we are gripping tightly to something. Then comes the sitting, stillness in which we ask, why? Then comes the falling, not as an effort, but as a surrender. The Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. One sees this with wisdom. One turns away from suffering. The leaf that clung was not stubborn. It was uncertain. Just like us, the practice is not to rip ourselves away from what we hold, but to become soft enough to fall when it is time. Modern psychology, connection in psychology, the act of letting go is often explored through the lens of attachment theory and acceptance-based therapies. We develop attachments not only to people, but to narrative stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we've lost, what we must control. Taro's clinging mirrors what therapists identify as experiential avoidance, the refusal to release, emotional pain, even when that pain becomes the very thing keeping us stuck in acceptance and commitment therapy act. The goal is not to eliminate difficult feelings, but to notice and make space for them. Realize that thoughts and emotions are not facts, they are experiences. Letting go does not mean erasing a memory, a trauma, or a hope. It means releasing the grip that says, I must never feel this, or I must always hold this. It is the shift from control to openness. Taro learns that letting go is not a decision of the mind alone. It is also a willingness of the heart. When he notices the leaf, he sees himself. When he finally sits, he creates the conditions for release. This mirrors somatic therapy, where the body must feel safe enough to let tension melt. The nervous system, like the leaf, only releases when trust has returned. Letting go is a relationship with gravity, with memory, with oneself. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. As the breath slows and the body softens, ask yourself, what am I still holding on to, not because I want to, but because I fear the falling? A name, a wound, a story. Close your eyes, feel. Your hands, are they clenched? Now gently open them. Breathe in, breathe out. Whisper, silently or aloud, I do not need to force it. I only need to notice the clinging, and let the falling come in its time. Imagine the leaf, the one that trembled and tore and held on. Now see it resting on the earth, not broken but transformed as the Buddha taught. Just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed the past over and over again. You are not failing by letting go. You are returning to the ground that will carry you, to the breath that will remind you, to the moment that is waiting, right here. Story 8. The silence between notes for the empty boat Zen collection in A mountain village known for its wind chimes and flute makers. There lived a blind musician named Sora. He played the shakuhachi, the bamboo flute once used by Zen monks, not only as an instrument, but as a tool for meditation. His breath could bend through a single note and carry it across the valley like a prayer, searching for a place to land. People from surrounding provinces came not to dance or be dazzled, to feel something they didn't have words for. And yet, Sora lived alone. He was not cold, not proud, just still. When people asked him why he had never taken a student, he would say, "Because most want to be heard, not to listen." But one day, a girl arrived, Aya, no older than 16. She had walked for 3 days from the river town, carrying nothing but a small bundle of food and a bamboo flute her grandfather had made. She waited on Sora's porch for hours, unmoving. In the quiet rain, at dusk, he opened the door. "I won't beg," she said, "but I want to learn the silence between notes." Sora paused. Then he said, "Come in." Aya was quick, disciplined, hungry. She practiced from dawn till dark, copying Sora's posture, breath, even the way he sat with the instrument across his lap like a child held with reverence. But she struggled with the silences. Whenever Sora instructed her to pause between phrases, let the note fully end before beginning, again her fingers would twitch, her breath would push forward. She hated the emptiness, the waiting. "I lose control in the silence," she confessed one night. Sora nodded. "That is why you must learn to stay there." He picked up his own flute. Then he played a note. Then stillness, another, then quiet. Each pause hung like mist in a pine forest barely seen, but completely felt. Aya sat frozen. She realized she had been holding her breath. When he finished, she whispered, "The notes were beautiful. But what broke me was what wasn't played." Sora smiled faintly. "The space," he said, "is where the soul speaks." In the months that followed, Aya began to shift. She no longer rushed into sound. She learned to wait, to let the notes fall like pebbles in a deep well and listen to the ripples before sending another. One night, as snow gathered on the windowsill, she asked, "Did you always play this way?" Sora was silent. Then, slowly, he said, "No. I used to play to be loved, to be praised, to fill the room with something so people wouldn't see my blindness." Aya looked down, and then she asked. "One day," he said, "a woman I loved left, not in cruelty, but in silence. She left a note that said, 'You never let me breathe. You filled every space with sound.'" He touched the flute softly, so I began to study silence, until it became the music. Aya nodded, and from that night on, her playing changed, not just in tone, but in truth. Zen reflection in Zen. Silence is not emptiness in the way the world defines it. It is fullness without noise, presence without performance. It is the space in which truth appears not through effort, but through allowance. Sora's teaching is a form of Ma-Japanese concept, often translated as gap or pause. But more deeply, it is the sacred interval, the space that gives meaning to sound, to movement, to form. Without silence, music is noise. Without breath, speech is chaos. Without stillness, wisdom cannot root. The Buddha taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." But even more powerful is the pause before that word, the breath that chooses it. Aya learns what all seekers eventually must. That silence is not the absence of meaning, but its birthplace. We do not fear silence because it lacks. We fear it because it reveals. Modern psychology, connection in therapy, silence is often misunderstood. Clients may feel uncomfortable when a therapist pauses, when no immediate answer comes, when a session lingers in stillness. But this space, if held gently, is where integration happens. Silence allows the unconscious to rise. It slows the mind. It lets the body speak. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, focuses on reframing thought, but mindfulness-based therapies go further. They invite clients to witness the thought, and then to let it pass. In the silence that follows, choice returns. Sora's music reflects interoception, the awareness of internal bodily states. When Aya learns to pause, she begins to feel her body, her breath, her intention. Her nervous system slows. Her playing becomes not just skilled, but sincere. In trauma work, survivors often fill space as a defense, fearing what might emerge if silence is allowed. But through co-regulation, as between Sora and Aya, silence becomes safe again, and eventually it becomes sacred. Closing reflection and meditation prompt as you prepare for rest tonight. Ask, what space have I been avoiding? What silence do I fear, not because it's empty, but because it might speak? Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply through your nose. Exhale slowly through pursed lips. Imagine a single note played gently on a flute. Now feel the stillness that follows. Let that silence enter you not as absence, but as a door. Say inwardly, I do not need to fill every space. I can allow the pause. I can hear the silence within me. As the Buddha taught, when the mind is silent, the song of wisdom begins. You are not required to speak. You are not required to answer, only to listen. And in that listening, you may hear yourself again. Story 9. The Candle and the Storm, for the Empty Boat Zen collection in a coastal town shaped by storms, where the wind carved its name into the cliffs and waves struck like drums against the shore. There stood an old lighthouse, long out of use. Its walls were chipped and salt-worn, its windows smeared with years of rain and mist. Yet inside, a single candle was lit every night. The keeper of the candle was a woman named Midori. She was not old, but she moved with the silence of someone who had seen too much. Her eyes, though kind, held a fatigue that even sleep could not soften. She lived alone, coming down only once a week to buy rice and oil. The villagers knew little about her, only that she was once a teacher, and that she had lost someone. No one asked her about it, and she offered nothing, but always, without fail, when the sun slipped behind the sea, a soft orange glow would appear through the lighthouse window. A single flame, UNMOVING. One night, a fierce storm came in from the east. It was sudden, violent. The waves slammed the rocks like fists. Trees bent until they cracked. Fishermen rushed to tie down boats. Power flickered and died across the village in the darkness. Many looked up toward the cliff and saw it, the tiny light, still burning, swaying slightly but never going out. The next morning, a boy named Ren, whose family had recently moved from the inland provinces, climbed the hill. His curiosity was unshakable, and the candle had lit something in him. He knocked. Midori opened the door. She looked at him for a long time, then stepped aside. Inside, the room was simple: a table, a cushion, and at the center, the candle on a metal tray, its flame still dancing faintly from the storm's breath. Ren pointed. How did it not go out? Midori replied. Because it was not afraid of the wind. Over the weeks that followed, Ren came back, not always with questions, sometimes just to sit. Midori did not teach in the way of instruction, but in presence. She boiled tea. She cleaned the walls. She trimmed the wick, all with the same careful rhythm, as if guarding the flame was a meditation. One evening, he found her gazing out the window. "My brother," she said quietly, without preamble, "was lost at sea." Ren did not respond. He was a fisherman, strong, brave, laughed loudly. One night the waves rose too high. His boat never returned. I used to think if I kept a light burning, he might find his way back. Her voice was soft, but steady. Years passed, he never came, but the candle became something else. Not a call, but a vow. Ren tilted his head. A vow. Midori turned to him, that no matter how dark the night, how violent the storm, something gentle would remain. Time moved as it does in quiet places, measured not in minutes, but in shifts of light and shadow. Ren began helping with small tasks. He learned how to trim a wick without breaking it, how to shield a flame while relighting it, how to clean soot without disturbing the memory it carried. He once asked, "Don't you get tired of protecting it?" Midori smiled. "It's not that I protect it, it's that I become it." She paused. "When you become the flame, you don't fear the storm. You learn to flicker, not to break." Zen reflection, the candle is a symbol as old as consciousness. It illuminates without shouting. It burns without force. It gives warmth, but requires protection. In Zen, the flame is the mind in meditation, soft, unwavering, held in attention. The storm is the world, full of noise, fear, distraction, grief. Midori's vow is the Bodhisattva's vow, to remain in this world, lit, even amidst suffering. She does not burn the candle for an audience, or out of delusion. She burns it as a remembrance, as a choice. The Buddha said, though he be surrounded by trouble, he remains unshaken, like a rock in the wind. Zen does not ask us to extinguish the storm. It teaches us how to stay lit within it. The practice is not about resistance. It is about endurance. Not rigid, but alive. Modern psychology, connection in trauma therapy, one of the key capacities for healing is resilience, the ability to remain psychologically intact amidst adversity. But true resilience is not mere toughness. It is the flame of regulation. Midori's candle reflects what psychologists call emotional co-regulation. Her steadiness becomes an anchor for Ren. In her presence, he learns calm not through words, but through witnessing. Modern neuroscience shows that the nervous system responds not just to external danger, but to internal signals of safety. When someone models calm under pressure, our mirror neurons begin to follow. This is the healing power of presence. Midori also represents meaning, making a critical component of post-traumatic growth. Her act of lighting the candle transforms her grief from paralysis into purpose, not to undo the loss, but to keep a light lit in the space it left behind. We cannot always stop the storms, but we can choose to be the flame that dances, not drowns. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. Before sleep, ask, what is the storm I fear? And what small flame have I forgotten to protect? Now close your eyes, take a slow breath in, exhale gently, as if blowing softly across the top of a candle. Feel the flicker in your chest, the warmth, the presence. Say inwardly, I am not the storm. I am the light that remains, even if small, even if tired, even if swaying. You are here, and that is enough. As the Buddha taught, Just as a lamp does not flicker in a windless place, so the disciplined mind of a yogi remains steady in meditation. Let your breath become the shelter. Let your stillness be the flame, and sleep, not in silence, but in light. Story 10. The monk who forgot the sutra for the empty boat's end collection. There was once a young monk named Kiji who lived at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where cherry blossoms bloomed early and snow lingered late. He was bright, eager, and precise, the kind of student who woke before the bell and memorized the sutras word for word. He carried his prayer beads with reverence. He copied scriptures in perfect calligraphy. He bowed so deeply it seemed he would fall into the earth, but beneath his devotion lived a quiet fear, the fear of forgetting. More than anything, Kiji was terrified of getting it wrong. Each night, he would recite the Diamond Sutra from memory. He knew every phrase, every cadence. He believed that mastery of the text would bring him closer to enlightenment. And so, for years, he studied, he fasted, he isolated himself to avoid distraction. He became admired, even envied. But the truth was, he was tired, his eyes strained, his heart ached. Yet still he pushed forward, convinced that forgetting even a single word would undo everything. Then, one spring morning, it happened. During the sunrise chanting, as the monks stood in a circle beneath the temple bell, Kiji's mind went blank. He reached the third stanza and nothing came, no words, no rhythm, just silence. He froze. The monk beside him gently continued the verse, and the circle flowed on, like a river finding its path around a stone. But Kiji was already unraveling. He fled the hall after the ceremony, retreating to the meditation room, hands shaking. "What does it mean?" he whispered to himself. "If I no longer remember the teachings?" He sat in stillness for hours, ashamed and disoriented. At dusk, Master Ryunin entered quietly and sat beside him, without looking at him. The old master said, "When the words leave you, what remains?" Kiji blinked. Ryun continued. "Sutra is not in your mouth. It is in your being. A memorized truth is not the same as a lived one." Kiji said nothing. The master smiled. "Perhaps," he said gently, "you are finally ready to understand." That night, Kiji did not open his scriptures. Instead, he walked through the temple garden. He stopped before the old pine tree, knotted and bent but still rooted. He touched its bark. He sat beneath it and listened not to thoughts, but to the wind, the rustling bamboo, the breath of night itself. He realized something strange, though he had forgotten the words. He felt more present than ever. No chant, no mantra, just life. He looked up at the sky, dark and wide, and felt himself small, but real tears came. Not from failure, but from the sudden absence of the need to prove. In the days that followed, Kiji returned to the morning chants, but with a softened heart. He no longer strained to remember. Sometimes he whispered. Sometimes he listened. Sometimes he closed his eyes and let the rhythm carry him. Other monks noticed the change. He laughed more, walked slower, made more mistakes and seemed more at peace with them. Master Ryunin gave him a new assignment, to teach the sutra to the youngest novices. "But I forgot it," Kiji protested. The master smiled. "Then teach what remained." Zen reflection. This story reminds us of a central Zen principle. Knowing is not the same as being. Kiji represents the seeker who confuses accumulation with realization. He clings to the form, the words, the rituals. The exactness says, if they are the gate to awakening. But Zen dismantles this illusion. Zen says, when you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha, not to destroy truth, but to move beyond its form. The map is not the journey. The words are not the experience. The Buddha said, the finger that points to the moon is not the moon. We must not fall in love with the finger. We must look to where it points, and eventually we must look with our own eyes. Kiji's forgetting is not a failure. It is an opening. In silence, he meets the essence beneath the teaching. He ceases to perform, begins to embody. Zen does not ask us to be perfect, only present. Modern psychological terms. Kiji suffers from performance-based identity, the belief that one's worth is measured by achievement or mastery. This can create imposter syndrome, chronic anxiety, and a fragile sense of self that shatters under failure. Kiji's attachment to the sutra reflects what cognitive therapists call cognitive fusion, being so entangled with thoughts or standards that one loses flexibility. Healing begins with diffusion, learning to observe thoughts without being consumed by them. Mindfulness practices train this skill. When one forgets a word in meditation, the instruction is not to panic or try harder, but to return, to observe, to breathe. Kiji's forgetting becomes a therapeutic rupture. It interrupts the perfectionism long enough for his nervous system to settle. He experiences psychological flexibility, the key trait linked to resilience and well-being. Teaching others after forgetting further cements this. He moves from performer to mentor, from technician to human. His knowledge is no longer brittle. It breathes. Closing reflection and meditation prompt a night. Ask yourself, what truth am I trying too hard to remember? What part of me feels that forgetting means failing? Close your eyes. Place one hand on your chest, the other on your belly. Breathe in, hold gently, exhale slowly. Say inwardly, I am more than what I remember. I am enough, even when I forget. Let the pressure soften. Let the silence speak. You are not a vessel for perfect words. You are the lived sutra. You are the breath between the stanzas. As the Buddha taught, be a lamp unto yourself. Hold fast to the truth. Look not for refuge in others. And sometimes the truth is not remembered. It is felt. It is lived. It is already here. Story 11. The girl with no name for the empty boat. Zen collection. There was once a girl who arrived at the monastery gate with no shoes, no bag, and no name. She looked no older than 17. Her clothes were torn, her hair uncombed, and her eyes carried a silence deeper than words. When the head monk, Sister Anzu, asked her name, the girl simply bowed. She did not speak. Are you mute? Asked Anzu. The girl shook her head. Do you not remember your name? The girl looked at the sky, then at the ground, then shook her head again. Sister Anzu smiled gently. Then you are free. And so, the girl became a student not of scriptures, but of silence. The monks called her Muna, which in the old tongue meant nothing or without name. She swept the temple floors. She carried firewood. She served tea with quiet hands and listened more than she spoke. She was not unkind, only still, as if she had stepped out of a deeper world into ours, and found the noise strange. Over time, her silence became a mirror. People began to talk to her, not expecting answers, but to hear themselves. One old monk confessed a lie he had buried for decades. A merchant who came to donate rice wept as he told her he had wronged his brother. A widow who visited the temple simply held Muna's hand and said, "Thank you for not asking." No one quite knew who she was. No one asked where she came from, yet everyone felt lighter after being near her. One day, a traveling monk named Jotaro visited the temple. He was renowned across the southern provinces as a scholar and teacher. Carried scrolls and robes embroidered with red thread. He walked with the confident gait of one who had lectured kings. When he heard of the girl with no name, he was intrigued. He found her by the pond, feeding turtles with old rice. "Tell me," he said, "do you know who you are?" Muna did not reply. He tried again. "If you have no name, how do you know you exist?" She placed a grain of rice on her palm and offered it to a turtle, which crawled out from the reeds, and took it gently. Jotaro frowned. He sat beside her and recited a passage from the Lotus Sutra. Still, Muna said nothing. Finally, with growing irritation, he said, "Are you pretending to be wise, or are you simply empty?" Muna turned to him and said, very softly, "Is there a difference?" Later that night, Jotaro approached Sister Anzu. "She must be tested," he said. "She cannot go on like this floating, undefined. Even Zen must be understood through words eventually. We must know who she is." Sister Anzu looked at the flickering oil lamp between them. "You seek to define what has already become clear," she said. "But she has no teachings," Jotaro protested. "She is the teaching," Anzu replied. Jotaro said nothing. He left before dawn the next day, quietly, without a word to Mu-Na. Seasons passed. Muna remained as she was, quiet, present, simple, but within her grew a certain awareness. She began to hear the names others carried, the successful one, the shamed, the widow, the scholar, each a title etched onto flesh, carried like a burden. She began to wonder what hers had once been. One evening, Sister Anzu sat beside her under the plum tree. "Would you like a name, child?" she asked. Muna thought for a long time. Then she asked, "If I take a name, will I lose this peace?" Anzu smiled. "Only if you believe the name is who you are." Muna looked up at the stars. "No," she whispered, "then I am still no one." Anzu nodded, "And yet, in being no one, you've helped so many." Muna smiled, and for the first time, she laughed. Zen reflection, this story is a meditation on identity, the names we wear, the masks we hold, and the stories we believe about ourselves. Muna means without name, and she lives without the cage of identity. In Zen, this is not a loss, it is a liberation. The Buddha taught that the self is a collection of aggregates, form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. No one part is a self. The illusion of a permanent I causes attachment, suffering, and confusion. In the Diamond Sutra, it is written, "If a person were to say, 'I have attained the Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, supreme enlightenment,' he would be speaking falsely, for there is no fixed self to attain it." Muna embodies this truth. By having no defined self, she becomes a mirror. She reflects others, not by doing, but by being. This is a core teaching of Zen. The less you are, the more you become. Modern psychology, connection. In psychology, we are often trapped in what is called narrative identity, the internal story we tell about who we are. Sometimes this story is helpful, but often it becomes rigid. I'm the failure, I'm the strong one, I'm not lovable. These identities are reinforced over time and limit our growth. Muna's character, resonates with the concept of decentering in mindfulness-based therapy, the ability to see thoughts and labels as events in the mind, not as absolute truths. She is also an example of non-reactive presence, a skill central to therapies like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, where one learns to observe internal experiences without clinging to them. People around Muna feels safe because she offers no judgment. In trauma therapy, this kind of non-verbal attunement, being present without demanding, is deeply healing. By not defining herself, Muna allows others to unburden theirs. Closing reflection and meditation prompt tonight. Reflect on this. What names have you been carrying? Were they given to you, or did you choose them? Are they still serving you? Find a quiet place. Close your eyes. Visualize writing your name on a leaf. Then place it on a stream and watch it float away. Breathe deeply. Feel yourself beneath the names, before the roles, before the labels, before the story. Just breath, just presence, just being. You are more than your name. You are the space between stories. As the Buddha once said, in seeing nothing as mine, the heart rests free and vast. So tonight, may you rest, not as someone, but as stillness itself. Story 12. The Thief Who Left Gold Behind for the Empty Boat. Zen Collection. A long time ago, in a fog-covered valley near the mountains of the east, there lived a humble monk named Renshin. His hut was made of mud and bamboo, perched on the edge of the forest where deer passed and cicadas sang at dusk. He owned only a kettle, a straw mat, a faded robe, and a bowl. Yet, those who met him felt he had everything. Each morning, Renshin swept his tiny path with a reed broom and bowed to the rising sun. Children sometimes watched him, wondering why someone who seemed to have nothing could smile so peacefully. Rumors spread in nearby villages. This monk could read the wind, talk to birds, and sit for hours with wild foxes by his side. But Renshin denied it all with a wave of his hand. I simply sit, he said, and listen. One day, just before the full moon festival, a thief came. He had heard whispers of the monk's golden tea and magical scriptures. In truth, he had robbed many homes, but never a monk's hut. He thought it would be easy. What could an old man do? That night, as mist curled along the mountain trail, the thief crept silently to the hut. He pulled the bamboo door aside, stepped in, and froze. Renshin was sitting cross-legged by a small lantern, his eyes closed, body still. The light flickered across his face. The thief looked around. There was nothing, no gold, no jewels, not even a locked box. Only a robe hung on the wall, a teapot steaming gently, and a wooden bowl beside a stone. Then, without opening his eyes, the monk spoke. You have come a long way, he said calmly, and you must be tired. The thief jumped back, hand to his dagger. How did you? I heard your heart before your footsteps, Renshin said, smiling. The thief narrowed his eyes. You have nothing worth stealing. The monk nodded. That is true, but you may take my bowl if you like. It has held rice from kind villagers for 20 years. It will serve you better than me. He reached slowly, picked up the bowl, and offered it with both hands. The thief blinked, but was this a trick? Was the bowl enchanted? He took it anyway. And take this too, Renshin said, removing his faded robe. Nights are cold. You'll need it more than I. The thief, stunned, accepted the robe. He had no idea why. Sleep here tonight, Renshin continued. I will go sit under the stars. The thief stammered, "Aren't you afraid I'll kill you?" Renshin bowed. "You already have, if I fear you." Then he stepped outside. That night, under the moon, Renshin sat among the pine trees, listening to the wind in their branches. The thief, still confused, lay on the straw mat, holding a monk's robe and a bowl he did not need. By morning, the thief was gone, but he had left the robe folded neatly by the door. Inside it, wrapped carefully, was a small pouch of gold coins, likely stolen from many homes, now returned not by guilt, but by silence. The bowl, too, was placed by the kettle, and beside it, a note on birch bark. "You gave me more than I came to steal." Renshin smiled, then went to make tea. Zen reflection, this story, like many in Zen tradition, turns the world on its head. A thief comes to take hand instead. Receives, a monk, who owns nearly nothing, gives away even that. This is not naivety, it is clarity. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred. Hatred ceases only by love." This is an eternal law. Renshin does not resist the thief, because he has nothing to defend, not materially, and not in ego. By offering what little he has with peace, he mirrors the thief's inner hunger not for objects, but for kindness. This is the radical path of non-dash resistance. Not weakness, but the power of presence that disarms violence without striking back. Modern psychology, connection in modern psychology. This story resonates with ideas from trauma theory and de-escalation. The thief comes with an activated nervous system. Flight, freeze. He expects confrontation, perhaps fear. But what he meets is co-regulation, the calm nervous system of a monk who sees the thief not as a threat, but as a human being in pain. Renshin's behavior also aligns with non-violent communication, meeting aggression not with reaction, but with empathy and offering. In therapies like IFS, internal family systems, we might say that the monk is acting from his self-calm, curious, compassionate, while the thief is ruled by an exiled part, desperate for control or validation. And when met with compassion, that part begins to soften. The robe and bowl are not just objects. They are symbols of being seen, and in being seen, not judged, not condemned, the thief returns the gold he stole. This is not a miracle, it's a deep truth. When met without fear, even the wounded can choose healing. Closing reflection and meditation. Prompt tonight, consider this. What do you hold tightly? Your status, possessions, your rightness? What might you give away, not because you have to, but because you are free? Sit in silence. Imagine someone you fear or resent. Now picture offering them something not material, but sincere, a gesture, a smile, a listening ear, not to excuse their harm, but to stop being trapped by your own armor. As you breathe in, feel your chest soften. As you breathe out, whisper inwardly, "I have nothing to protect. I am already enough." And remember the teaching of the monk who gave his robe to a thief. In the end, we own nothing, and in that emptiness, we find everything. Story 13. The Man Who Chased the Echo. Part of the Empty Boat. Zen Kaglachen once, in the mountainous edges of a forgotten country, where cliffs rose like ancient teeth into the sky, there lived a man named Yuto. He was known for his brilliance in logic and debate. In the village, he was admired and feared. In equal measure, he could argue the wind into stillness and talk a man out of his own name. But Yuto was not happy. He had built a library of scriptures, learned the sutras of Mabina and the discourses of the elders. He could quote Nagarjuna and recite the words of the Buddha by memory. Still, a hole sat inside him like a well that swallowed every answer. He began traveling, searching for a master who could show him what the scriptures could. Not. One day, he heard rumors of a Zen hermit who lived on a cliff, just beneath a waterfall, a man who never taught, never spoke, but was said to carry peace like a fragrance. Intrigued and a little condescending, Yuto packed his scrolls and climbed the path. The waterfall roared like the voice of the earth. Mist covered the trail. It took him a day and a half to find the hermit's dwelling, a hollow carved into stone, where a man sat watching the waterfall. The hermit did not move. Yuto cleared his throat. "I've come seeking truth." Silence. "I've studied for 20 years. I've read the entire Tipitaka twice." Nothing. "I demand at least one answer," Yuto barked. "One word of wisdom." Still, the hermit watched the fall of water. Frustrated, Yuto shouted, "Are you even listening to me?" The canyon caught his voice and hurled it back. "Listening to me, listening to me." Yuto glared at the hermit. "You sit here, like a rock. Is that your teaching?" The echo replied, "Your teaching, your teaching." Finally, the hermit turned. His eyes were kind, but unreadable, like the moon reflected in a lake. He said only this: "If you chase the echo, you will never hear the mountain." Then he turned back to the waterfall. Yuto stood, stunned. What does that mean?" Number. Reply. That night, he camped near the rocks, fire flickering. The echo of his own voice haunted him. Every word he'd spoken returned, distorted by the canyon, and each time he yelled for clarity, the mountain returned only confusion. He tried again. "What is the truth?" The echo came. "The truth, the truth. Who am I? Am I?" He sat by the fire, head in hands. The next morning, Yuto packed nothing. He left his scrolls by the cliff and walked down barefoot. He never debated again. He became a teacher who taught nothing, a listener, a wanderer, and some say, if you meet him by a river, he may sit with you in silence, until the echo in your heart quiets enough for the mountain to speak. Zen reflection: if you chase the echo, you will never hear the mountain. This story seems simple, but beneath its surface lies the foundation of Zen. Yuto represents the restless mind always chasing meaning, always shouting into the canyon, demanding answers. But what returns is not truth, it's our own noise. In the Vaimuttamaga, it is said, the mind that seeks enlightenment like a firefly chases the moon and never touches it. Zen does not reject knowledge, but it sees that truth is not found by adding more thoughts. It is found when thoughts fall away, like clouds revealing the blue sky. The mountain does not speak in words, it speaks in silence, and silence cannot be shouted into. Psychological commentary. To's journey mirrors the common pattern of intellectual overcompensation. Many of us, especially those wounded early by uncertainty or lack of control, develop brilliant intellects to protect ourselves. We collect facts, philosophies, credentials, but underneath, anxiety, a fear of not being enough without the answers. In therapy, this is often called cognitive defense. Thinking becomes a shield against feeling. The waterfall hermit doesn't feed Uto's intellect. He offers something deeper, mirror to his internal noise. The echo is a perfect metaphor for ruminative thought. When we ask what's wrong with me, the mind echoes back distorted versions. We chase the echo, but it never gives us the peace we seek. What breaks this loop? stillness, listening, surrender in internal family systems, IFS. We'd say that the manager part, the intellectual, Uto, loses its grip. And when it does, the core self, the mountain can be heard. The echo never stops by force. It fades when you stop chasing. Closing meditation prompt tonight. Sit with this. What echoes are you chasing? A mistake, a loss, a voice that told you long ago you weren't enough. Let them rise. Let them echo. And then imagine turning toward the mountain instead. Feel the weight of the earth beneath you, the rhythm of your breath, the sound not of thought, but of presence. Repeat inwardly. I release. The echo, I hear the mountain. Let silence teach you what words cannot. Story 14. The Woman and the Unsent Letter, part of the Empty Boat Zen collection. In a coastal town where salt clung to every window pane and the gulls cried like restless ghosts, there lived a woman named Hannah. Each morning she opened the same drawer. Inside it lay a letter folded carefully, ink faded slightly from time. She never mailed it. She never burned it. She only opened the drawer, looked at it, and closed it again. Her neighbors didn't know about the letter. They only knew her as the woman who ran the tea house by the cliff. She served jasmine and oolong with quiet elegance. Her voice was soft. Her eyes were kind. But there was something else in absence, like a melody missing its final note. No one knew what she had lost. Not even the sea, though it listened. 20 years earlier, Hannah had fallen in love. A wandering poet named Tetsu came through town. With his laughter and his notebooks, they talked by lantern light. They wrote haiku on driftwood. They walked without needing to speak. And one night, under a sky swollen with stars, Tetsu promised he'd return. He said, "Wait for me. I'll only be gone a season. There's a story I need to finish. And then you and I will begin." Hannah waited through spring, then summer, then years. She wrote him a letter when the silence became unbearable. It said, "I don't know why you never came back, but I still pour 2 cups of tea." She signed it with her full name, folded it, sealed. It tanned, never sent it. Time passed. Her hair silvered. Her garden grew, but the letter remained. One evening, during the monsoon season, a monk visited the tea house. His robe was soaked from the rain, and his eyes were the kind that see through time. She served him ginger tea. He looked around and said softly, "You've built something gentle here." She nodded. "It keeps me anchored." "Anchors are good," he said, "unless the tide wants to carry us." Double quotes. Hannah studied him. "Are you here to ask questions?" "No," he replied, "but I sense one inside you, unsent." She stiffened. He added, "Some letters are meant to be written, others to be released." She said nothing. He took his tea and walked out into the storm. But before the door closed, he turned and said, "The Buddha once said, you will not be punished for your anger, but by your anger. I wonder, could the same be said of grief?" That night, Hannah opened the drawer again. She unfolded the letter. Her hands trembled. She read each word aloud. Then she walked outside. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its scent. The ocean murmured, infinite and patient. She walked to the edge of the cliff, looked up at the indifferent stars, and let the letter go. It sailed for a moment, then the wind caught it, crumpled it, carried it out over the water. She didn't cry, she just stood. There, finally light. Zen reflection. Letting go does not always mean forgetting. Sometimes It means allowing something to move from the center of our hearts to a gentler place where it no longer grips, but simply rests. Hannah's unsent letter is a symbol for all that we hold on to. The unresolved endings, the words never, spoken the questions that haunt without answer. In the Vataka, the Buddha teaches, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross to the farther shore of existence. This is not a call to indifference, it is a call to freedom. Holding the past does not keep love alive. It keeps us from being alive. To let go of a letter is not to erase a memory. It is to stop asking it to return something it never could. Psychological commentary in modern psychology. Hannah's experience can be understood through the lens of ambiguous loss, grief without closure, where the person is gone but not confirmed. Gone, this kind of loss can freeze emotional processing, creating rituals like Hannah's drawer that become containers for unspoken pain. The letter is what therapists might call a grief object. It holds the unresolved emotions, the what ifs, the attachment that cannot find rest. Letting go doesn't happen by force. It happens when we are witnessed, when a presence like the monk sees us gently, without demand. This mirrors the therapeutic alliance. Safety creates space for release. Hannah's act of reading the letter aloud, then releasing it, is a powerful grief ritual. In internal family systems, we might say her exiled part full of longing was finally allowed to speak, and when it did, it no longer needed to shout from the drawer. The sea is a symbol of the unconscious. The stars are the unchanging. The letter, finally carried by the wind, is not a loss. It is integration. Closing meditation prompt tonight. Close your eyes. Imagine a letter you have not sent. Perhaps it's to someone you lost. Perhaps to a version of yourself. Feel its weight. Now imagine standing at the edge of a great ocean. Inhale. And as you exhale, let the letter go. Let the wind take it. Let the waves carry it. Say to yourself, I release what was never mine too. Hold. I keep only the love, and in the silence that follows, listen. You may hear peace arriving, not with thunder, but with wings. Story 15. The Temple of Shadows, part of the empty boat Zen collection high in the emerald hills of the north. Hidden beneath folds of fog and pine, there stood a monastery few dared to approach, not because it was cursed or dangerous, but because it was silent. Not the gentle silence of meditation, not the hush of prayer, but a heavy, peculiar silence, as if the temple itself were listening to something you could not hear. People called it the Temple of Shadows. No one knew who lived there now. Some said it had been abandoned. Others swore they saw a flicker of candlelight in the inner chambers when the moon was full. A few even whispered that a single monk remained dulled, hunched, half mad, speaking only in riddles. Few made the journey. Fewer returned with stories. But one day, a man named Jiro appeared at the foot of the path, winded and soaked in sweat. He had traveled across rivers, valleys, and dusty roads to reach this place. On his back, he carried a small sack. In his chest, a chaos he could no longer bear. He was a scholar by trade, a thinker by nature. But lately, no thought brought peace. No idea seemed true. His beliefs about right and wrong, love and justice, purpose and meaning had all begun to unravel. His marriage had collapsed. His health had failed. And worst of all, his certainty, his sacred certainty, was gone. He had read about the Temple of Shadows in a footnote of a forgotten manuscript, when nothing makes sense. Go where even the sun bows its head. So he came. The gates creaked, open when he touched them. Inside, the temple was simple. Worn wood, bowing walls. A garden overtaken by moss and memory. He wandered through the hallways until he found an old monk sitting by a dry fountain, surrounded by shadows that danced like ghosts. The monk opened one eye. "Why are you here?" Jiro dropped to his knees. "I am broken. I've read all the books, studied all the teachings, but now everything contradicts itself. I don't know what's true anymore." The monk nodded slowly, as if the words were not new. He said, "Come, I'll show you something." They entered a room completely dark. The monk struck a match. It barely lit the space, casting long shadows on the walls. "Look," he said, "where there is light, there is shadow." Now he snuffed the match. Darkness returned. But where? There is only darkness. Shadow cannot live. Jiro was confused. "But I thought shadow came from darkness." "No," said the monk. "Shadow is born from the interruption of light." He continued, "You came here hoping to escape contradiction. But contradiction is not a flaw in the world. It is the very place where truth lives." Jiro was silent. Monk walked to the window and opened it. Moonlight poured in, illuminating a tattered scroll. On it were two brushstrokes, one bold, sharp, like a sword. The other curved, soft, like a stream. Beneath it, a phrase, not two, not one. Zen reflection in the Vimalakirti Sutra, a lay practitioner is asked, "How does one enter the gate of non-duality?" And he answers not with words but by remaining silent. This teaching points to the very heart of Zen, that truth is not found in either or, but in the space between. Jiro's struggle is not unique. Many of us suffer when we realize the world is not as fixed as we once believed. When ideals crumble, when roles dissolve, when meaning becomes mist. But the spiritual path is not about cementing belief. It is about learning to rest in the tension, light and shadow, joy and sorrow, certainty and doubt. They are not enemies. They are dancing partners. To awaken is not to eliminate paradox, but to embrace it. Psychological reflection Jiro's crisis reflects what Carl Jung described as the encounter with the shadow. Self, the aspects of the psyche we repress, deny, or judge as incompatible with who we think we are. In times of life, upheaval, divorce, illness, failure, our constructed identities collapse, and we are left facing the unintegrated parts of ourselves. This is where healing begins. By entering the temple of shadows, symbolically, a place of psychological stillness, we begin to see. We see that our suffering does not come from the darkness itself, but from our resistance to it. From a therapeutic view, this aligns with dialectical thinking, the ability to hold two seemingly opposite truths as valid. Jiro thought he had to choose between contradiction and peace. But true peace is born from making room for contradiction, like the brushstrokes in the monk's scroll, strong and soft, not two, not one. Integration is not uniformity, it is wholeness. Closing meditation, prompt. Close your eyes, breathe, imagine. A temple hidden in the hills, its walls quiet, its roof open to the stars. You enter. There is no light, only stillness. In this darkness, ask yourself, what part of me have I denied? What truth am I afraid to hold? Now imagine a match is lit just for a moment. You see your own shadow, and you do not fear it. Whisper to yourself, I do not need all the answers. I only need to be whole. Let the match extinguish, and sit in the beautiful dark. Story 16. The monk who gave away everything, part of the empty boat, Zen collection in a quiet valley where clouds rested low over rice fields, and time moved like the breath of an old ox. There stood a tiny hermitage. It was little more than a hut, its walls of bamboo, its roof of straw, but it was home to one of the most revered monks in the region, Master Eck. Eck had no title, no disciples, no temple grounds, no statue to his name. Yet people from faraway provinces made the trek just to sit near him in silence. They came for wisdom, for healing, for the peace they could not find in cities, scrolls, or sermons. The strange thing was Eck owned almost nothing. He slept on a reed mat. He wore a robe that had been patched so many times the original fabric was untraceable. His bowl had a crack down the center, and he carried a stick that had no ornament, no carving, no name, and yet he glowed with something rare, something ungraspable. One autumn morning, a wealthy merchant named Genji arrived at the hermitage. His silk garments were embroidered with dragons. Gold rings adorned his fingers, and behind him were 3 servants, all carrying gifts, fine teas, bolts of silk, scrolls from the capital, and a lacquered box that smelled of camphor and koinek. Bowed gently. Gently.genj. I bowed in return. Master, he said with a low voice, I've heard of your great clarity. I've come to offer my devotion and seek your blessing. Eck pointed to a rock and invited the man to sit. They sat together in silence for many minutes. Eventually, Genji spoke again. All my life I've built wealth. I've followed duty. I've honored my ancestors. But my heart is heavy. My sleep is disturbed. I wake with dread I cannot explain, and nothing I buy seems to soothe it. Eck nodded. Genj. I gestured to the gifts, so I bring you these offerings. If you will accept them, perhaps some merit will return to me. The monk looked at the boxes. Then he shook his head gently. I cannot accept these, he said. Genji was confused. But why not? They are yours, if you wish. Eek smiled. Because the moment I take them, I would have something to lose. He stood, walked inside, and returned carrying the only item of value he possessed, a beautiful white stone the size of a peach, smooth as water and cold to the touch. This is from the riverbed near the glacier, said Eck. I found it in my youth. It's the only object I've kept through all these years. It reminds me that even a stone, over time, can become soft. He placed the stone in Genji's hand. The merchant was stunned. You would give me this? Eck nodded. Yes, and now I have nothing again. How fortunate. Zen reflection this. Story echoes one of the oldest koans in the Zen tradition. Found in the collection The Gateless Gate, a monk asked, What is the way? Master Joshu said, Throw it away. The monk asked, If I throw it away, what will I have? Joshu said, Nothing to lose. Zen does not glorify poverty in the literal sense. Rather, it points to the richness of noi attachment. Master Eck's power did not come from rejecting wealth, but from having no fear of losing anything. He held the stone for decades. And yet, the moment it no longer served the present, he let it go. This is the spirit of muja impermanence, not as tragedy, but as freedom. To live without clinging is to live without chains. Psychological reflection from a psychological perspective. Genji represents what modern therapy might call achievement. Fatigue. He has everything: status, success, security, but feels empty inside. This is a common crisis in modern life. The external self flourishes while the inner world collapses. Cognitive behavioral therapy and existential psychology both note how attachment to control, legacy, and possessions can become a defense against fear of death, meaninglessness, or vulnerability. But the more we hoard material or emotional, the more we fear losing. Refusal to own is not denial. It is a therapeutic practice of trust. He trusts that what is essential cannot be stolen, that peace is not stored in boxes, that joy is the byproduct of emptiness, not fullness. Gift of the stone is more than kindness. It is a mirror. It reflects to Genji the possibility of life without burden, and in giving away what mattered most. Equus, once again weightless, light, free. Closing meditation, prompt, find a quiet place. Sit with your breath. Now bring to mind something you feel attached to an object, a title, a relationship, a plan. Picture yourself holding it in your hands. Now gently, lovingly, release it. Place it on a river. Watch it float away, and whisper to yourself, I let go, not to lose, but to remember who I am without it. Let the breath come home. Let the space grow wide. Let the stillness be enough. Story 17. The Boy Who Threw Stones at the Moon, part of the Empty Boat Zen collection. There was a time when the moon was a god to the villagers. She ruled tides, lit fields at harvest, and kept watch when no one else did. In the small mountain village of Yukinosato, tucked in a valley of pine and river fog, a boy named Taro was born during a night of full moon. His grandmother, who delivered him, said he came out with his eyes wide open, as if seeing the world before he had yet breathed it. They said he was a child of the moon, but the moon never answered him. As he grew up, Taro would sit outside every night. The moon appeared and ask it questions. Why did my mother die? Where do people go when they leave? Why do I feel things I can't name? The moon stayed silent, always shining, always still. When Taro was 7, his father remarried a woman from another province. She was stern, proper, and believed in hard discipline. His father changed, too, became a man of little warmth, present in body, but far away in spirit. Taro began to feel like a visitor in his own home. Every night the moon arose, and every night Taro whispered to it, and every night it remained indifferent. So one evening, filled with rage, he picked up a stone and hurled it at the moon. It missed, of course, but he didn't stop. Night after night he threw stones at the moon, fist clenched, heart pounding. Answer me. Come down and face me. Say something. The villagers thought he was mad. Some laughed, others scolded. But an old monk named Ryerson, who lived in a mossy hut near the edge of the woods, began watching the boy. One night, as Taro raised another stone, Ryerson approached. You're angry, the monk said. Taro didn't turn around. She never answers. Ryerson sat beside him. The moon. Taro nodded. She sees everything, he said. She was there when my mother died. She sees how my father forgets I exist. And she does nothing. Ryerson looked at the moon, then at the boy. Let me tell you something, he said. When I was your age, I threw stones at the wind. Taro turned to him. Why? Because the wind took my brother. Taro lowered the stone I threw and shouted, but the wind never stopped. It just kept blowing through trees, carrying seeds, turning leaves. It never changed for me. Taro stared at the monk, tears forming. Then why do you smile? Because one day I realized the wind had always been listening, just not in the way I wanted. Zen reflection. In Zen tradition, many parables explore our relationship with silence, the universe, and unmet expectations. One such classic is the tale of the monk who sat for years in meditation waiting for a vision of the Buddha to appear. When it never came, he wept. But in his tears, he finally realized the silence itself was the answer. Dotaro, in his pain, mistook the moon's silence for abandonment. But in truth, the moon was always there and changing, patient, present. Zen teaches us that awakening often comes not in receiving what we want, but in realizing we already have what we need, just not in the form we expected. The boy threw stones at something that could not be broken, only misunderstood. Psychological reflection. Emotionally, Tara's behavior reflects displaced grief and developmental abandonment. Children without an outlet for grief often direct their anger at symbols: sky, God, fate, because those targets feel infinite and safe. One cannot truly be rejected by the moon. In modern psychotherapy, this is called externalized projection. It's a survival tool. When the real source of hurt, like a distant parent or lost loved one, is too painful to confront directly, the mind finds a safer target. Ryerson. The monk does not try to silence or correct Taro. He validates the anger. He shares his own story, gently shifting the boy's focus from confrontation to reflection. This is therapeutic mirroring, and it helps Taro realize that his suffering is seen not by the moon, but by someone human. Sometimes what heals us is not an answer from the cosmos, but the quiet presence of someone who understands how we feel. Meditative closing prompt tonight. When the moon rises, go outside. Sit in stillness. Bring to mind something you have fought against, a loss you didn't deserve, a silence that hurt, a presence that vanished. Now breathe. See if you can be with that feeling, without judging it, without fixing it, just being with it. And imagine the moon sees you, not to speak, not to fix, just to witness you, exactly as you are. Let that be enough. Let that be peace. Story 18. The Clay Cup That Held the Sky, part of the Empty Boat Zen collection. The sky was pale the morning old Jiro died. Not the kind of dramatic sky you read in stories. No thunder, no red clouds or wild winds. Just a soft, grey blue canvas, like rice paper brushed with cool water. And in that gentle sky, the villagers of Umetsu lit incense for a man who spoke little, asked for nothing, and spent his final 30 years making tea in a hut beside a dry stream. They called him the Clay Monk because every person who visited him left with the same thing: a small, hand-shaped clay cup, simple, uneven, fragile. But when they drank from it, they swore the tea tasted clearer, more honest. No one knew why. Some said it was the mountain water. Some said it was the monk's silent presence. Some said the cups were shaped by the moonlight itself. But after Jiro died, no one could make tea quite the same way. The story of old Jiro wasn't told in a single tale. It lived in fragments, in the quiet conversations under pine trees, in the faded clay cups passed down through generations. But one story always returned: the story of the man who came to destroy him. It happened many years before Jiro's passing. A scholar from the city arrived, a man of high status, silk robes, and a proud beard that danced when he spoke. His name was Renjiro. He had studied all the sutras, debated in temples, and even taught the emperor's nephew the meaning of nirvana. But when his wife died suddenly, Renjiro's mind broke inwards. He spent months in silence, staring at her empty seat across from him, and in the stillness, something inside him collapsed. The books, the doctrines, the titles, none of them stopped the ache. Then he heard about the clay monk who healed people with tea and silence. Out of both mockery and desperation, he made the journey to Umetsu. When he arrived, Jiro was sitting outside, shaping a lump of earth into a bowl. Renjiro didn't bow. "I've heard you're wise," he said sharply, "but I don't see scriptures or students, only mud." Jiro looked up with soft eyes. He said nothing. Renjiro took out a scroll. "This," he said, "is the Diamond Sutra in my own commentary. Perhaps you've heard of it." Jiro placed the lump of clay down and stood. He poured water from a cracked kettle into a freshly shaped cup and handed it to the scholar. Renjiro took it, annoyed. "Do you think your peasant tea can mend a philosopher's grief?" He sipped it, and for a moment, he said nothing. The steam rose into the morning light like incense. The cup warmed his fingers. The tea tasted simple, alive. And then the cup cracked in his hand. Hot water spilled onto his robes. The cup broke into 3. Renjiro stood, furious. "This is nonsense. Child's play. You call this Zen?" Jiro simply picked up the broken pieces. He said one sentence. "A cracked cup can still hold the sky." Zen reflection. Zen has no use for prestige and no fear of simplicity. In many stories, awakening does not come from deep philosophy, but from direct experience, raking leaves, sweeping floors, watching steam rise from tea. The cup is a powerful image in Zen. It is empty by nature, yet its purpose is to hold. When it is full of pride, doctrine, or identity, it cannot receive. Old Jiro offers tea not as a cure, but as a mirror. The crack in the cup reflects the crack in Renjiro's heart, and yet even cracked things hold beauty. Even broken hearts can receive truth. To live in Zen is to embrace both emptiness and imperfection, to be a cracked cup and still open to the sky. Psychological reflection from a psychological perspective. This story mirrors the failure of intellectual bypassing. Renjiro represents those of us who try to think our way through pain using books, logic, even spiritual teachings as a wall against grief. But real healing does not happen in the mind. It happens in the body, in presence, in simplicity. Jiro doesn't argue. He doesn't interpret. He offers presence, a cup, a shared silence. This is the essence of somatic healing. Touch, warmth, ritual. The broken cup is an archetype of wabi-sabi, the Japanese aesthetic of finding beauty in imperfection. To allow ourselves to grieve, not to fix, but to feel, is the first step to healing. The cup broke, the tea spilled, but the sky did not fall. Meditative closing prompt tonight. Light a candle. Take your favorite cup, even if chipped. Especially if chipped. Pour something warm. Hold it with both hands. Smell it. Feel its heat. Now ask yourself, what part of me is cracked? Don't try to fix it. Just notice it. Honor it then, as you drink. Imagine the sky entering that cracked place, not to fill it, but to sit with it. And as you finish your tea, remember, a cracked cup can still hold the sky. And so can you. Story 19. The Lantern That Burned Without Fire. Part of the Empty Boat Zen collection. It was a winter evening when I first found the lantern. Snow had just begun to fall in the mountains of Nara, soft as breath. The forest was still, wrapped in the hush of white silence. I had been walking for hours, trying to escape my own thoughts, when I stumbled upon the hut. It wasn't marked on any map, the kind of place that disappears once you leave it. It looked abandoned, except for the warm glow coming from inside, a strange amber light, steady and unwavering, like a flame frozen in time. I knocked once, no answer. I pushed the door gently. It creaked open to reveal a room empty of furniture, save for a single paper lantern hanging in the center, suspended by a red thread. It gave off a deep orange light, like the setting sun caught in silk. But here was the strangest thing. There was no fire, no candle, no oil, no wires, and yet the lantern glowed. I sat down, drawn to its warmth. Though the room was cold, I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes, a man was sitting across from me. He wore robes of forest brown, and his face was aged like bark-lined. "Still knowing, you found it," he said simply. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at the lantern and smiled. "That is the light that remains when everything else is gone. Many years ago, long before I found the lantern, it belonged to a Zen monk named Dukai. Dukai lived in a monastery where silence was sacred and chores were meditation. But unlike the other monks, Dukai was afraid of darkness. Not the kind outside, but the kind inside. The silence that came when the world turned quiet every night. He lit 3 lanterns in his room, as if trying to keep his thoughts at bay. With light dot, his master noticed Dukai. The old abbot said one evening, "What are you running from?" "I fear what visits me in the dark." The monk replied. The master nodded. "Then go to the forest and take no light with you." Trembled. "Alone. Yes. Stay for 7 nights. If you find a light that does not burn, return." So Dukai went. He carried no fire, no food, only a blanket and a prayer. The forest at night was vast and merciless. Wolves howled, winds bit, trees creaked like old bones. And in that darkness, Dukai's fear became a mirror. He saw himself, his past, his doubts, his guilt, and still he stayed. On the 7th night, after hours of meditation, he heard something, not a voice, not a word, but a presence, like being watched by the stars. He opened his eyes and saw it, a small glow in the snow, warm and steady, coming from a handmade lantern. No flame, no fuel, only light. When he returned to the monastery, he placed the lantern in the meditation hall. It never went out. Even after he died, it glowed, even now. No one knows how dots, Zen, reflection, the lantern that burns without fire, is one of Zen's most quiet yet powerful metaphors. It is the light of presence, of consciousness, of pure awareness, untouched by thought, fear, or ego. In Zen, there is a teaching that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The difference is not in the task, but in the light by which it is done. Dokai's journey was not one of escape, but of return. To sit with the darkness is to meet ourselves stripped of distraction, of status, of control. And from that darkness, a different light emerges, not the light we make, but the light we are. Psychological reflection. Fear of darkness is not just a childhood fear, it's a deep symbol for the unconscious, the unknown, the unprocessed pain within us. In modern psychology, we often talk about shadow work, the process of bringing hidden parts of the self into awareness. Dekai's journey mirrors this exactly. He did not fight his fear, nor did he numb it with distractions. He entered it. He sat in the forest of his own psyche, alone, cold, and vulnerable. And in doing so, he discovered something we often forget, that stillness is not the absence of noise, but the presence of something deeper. The light he found was the calm clarity that arises when we stop resisting what we feel. The lantern burns because it accepts the dark, and so can we. Meditative closing prompt tonight: turn off every light, put your phone away, sit in the dark, breathe, notice what arises. Don't run, don't analyze, just breathe. Then ask yourself, what am I avoiding when I turn on the light? And, in that silence, say gently, I am willing to see what's here. And if you find even a flicker of stillness, that is your lantern, that is your light, keep it. Story 20. The tea that poured itself from the empty boat Zen healing collection. It was just after a summer storm when I returned to the tea house. The earth still smelled of rain, and petals from the camellia tree had scattered themselves across the stone path like quiet confetti. I hadn't been back in years, not since Master Ag passed. But something pulled me back, a whisper, maybe, or a promise left unfinished. The tea house was unchanged, wooden slats warped with age, bamboo mat still curled at the edges, but inside it was dustless, as if time had bowed and waited at the door. I knelt where I used to sit, across from Master Ag's place. For a moment, silence, and then I saw it, the teapot. It was his favorite, smooth clay, burnished by decades of use. It sat on the tray, lid slightly ajar. I smiled. Just an old habit, I thought. Then it happened. The pot tilted, slowly, steadily, and a line of steaming tea poured into the cup in front of me. I didn't move. There was no hand, no wind, just the sound of tea, and a feeling the way you feel when someone you love enters the room. Even if you can't see them. I cupped the warm ceramic and whispered, "Thank you, Master." Years ago, I was a student of Agasan, a tea monk of the old school. Not the kind that recited doctrine or led formal ceremonies, but one who lived in such deep presence that even the act of pouring water became a sermon. I came to him when I was angry at my father, my job, the world. I carried questions, like blades, sharp and impatient. Ag never answered them. He simply poured tea. One day, I snapped. "Why won't you say anything?" I ask, "and you give me silence." He looked up, eyes soft. "You cannot drink when your cup is full of fire," he said. "I wait until you're ready to receive." Then he poured again, and this time I listened, not with ears, but with stillness. In that moment, something shifted. Zen parable. There's an old Zen story, told many times in many ways. A scholar once came to visit a great Zen master. He talked endlessly about philosophy, scriptures, methods, all he had read and believed. The master listened. Then, he said, "Let us have tea." He began to pour. He poured and poured until the tea overflowed, spilling onto the table, dripping to the floor. "Stop," the scholar cried. "Can't you see the cup is full?" The master smiled. "Yes. Like this cup, you are full of your own ideas. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" Philosophical reflection. The cup is not just a vessel. It is a mirror. It shows us how little we allow ourselves to receive, how often we come to life already filled with opinion, expectation, control. In Zen, emptiness is not nothingness. It is space, sacred space, space where truth can enter, space where healing can unfold. The tea that pours itself is not magic. It is the result of presence meeting readiness. When we stop grasping, what we seek often comes. When we sit still, the universe pours into us, like tea, patient and warm. Psychological reflection in modern life. We are the scholar, filled with noise. We absorb podcasts while eating, scroll while walking, judge before hearing. Our mental cup is overflowing. No wonder we feel burned out, disconnected. Therapy speaks of cognitive overload, where the mind cannot process new insight, because it's already saturated with old patterns. Healing begins when we create space, when we let go of the need to know, when we stop interrupting our own silence. Like Master Ag, the deepest wisdom comes not in giving answers, but in waiting until the student is truly listening. Sometimes, the most therapeutic moment is when the therapist says nothing and simply pours tea. Meditative closing prompt tonight. Prepare tea as a ritual. Boil water slowly. Watch the steam. Feel the warmth in your hands. Drink in silence. Then ask, what am I too full of? What beliefs, stories, grudges, identities are taking up all the room? And then, with a quiet breath, say, I empty my cup. I am ready. You may be surprised what life chooses to pour. Story 21. The lamp and the shadow from the Empty Boat Zen healing collection. There was a time in my life when I feared my own shadow. Not metaphorically, I mean this quite literally. Every night, after the lamp was lit and the room still, I would see it moving along the walls, long, distorted, echoing my shape. I would lie there, heart racing, as though it was something chasing me, something waiting to devour me the moment I closed my eyes. I was only 8 years old then, but the fear stayed, even when I grew older. Even when the shadows changed shape into deadlines, memories, expectations, and buried shame, I remained that same child, flinching at the thing that followed me. One night, when I could no longer carry it, I traveled to a temple said to be so quiet that even thoughts softened upon arrival. There I met a monk with a face like weathered stone and eyes that had seen many storms. Why have you come? He asked. I told him the truth. I am afraid of my shadow. He looked at me, silent. Then he turned and walked. No instruction, number, comfort. I followed. We went into a dark room, no windows, only a single candle placed in the center. Sit, he said. I did. Watch your shadow. Do not look away. I began to shake, but I obeyed. Time passed. I don't know how long. The candle flickered. My shadow moved, danced, lengthened and shrank. Then he whispered, now blow out the flame. I hesitated. Blow it out, he said again. So I did. And in that instant, the shadow disappeared. The monk leaned in and said, there, you see. Shadow exists only because you cling to light. Let go, and it vanishes. Zen parable. Long ago, in a village at the base of Mount Dago, lived a man who was terrified of his own shadow. No matter where he went, it followed. He ran across fields, down rivers, through forests, but the shadow was always there. Exhausted, he collapsed by a shrine and wept. An old priest, hearing his cries, approached and said, you have misunderstood. The shadow is not chasing you. It is you. To be free, do not run from it. Instead, sit still. Let the sun set. When night comes, it will disappear on its own. And so the man waited until dusk. When darkness embraced the earth, the shadow faded, and the man finally slept peacefully for the first time. Philosophical reflection. We are beings made of light and shadow. To seek only light is to invite suffering. To run from shadow is to remain enslaved. Zen teaches that darkness is not the Enemy of light, it is its complement, its mirror, its teacher. Just as the moon has a hidden side, so too do we. But the problem is not the shadow. The problem is our resistance to seeing it. We fear the parts of ourselves we do not understand. Anger, desire, guilt, sorrow. But in denying them, we make them grow monstrous. In truth, the shadow is not a monster. It is a child we have abandoned. And like all abandoned children, it only grows louder, to be heard. Psychological reflection, Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In therapy, we call this the shadow self, the parts of our psyche that we suppress because they are uncomfortable, unacceptable, or painful. Yet what we suppress does not disappear. It acts out through anxiety, projection, addiction, sabotage. Healing begins when we turn inward, gently, when we say, yes, I have fear. Yes, I carry jealousy. Yes, I feel rage sometimes. To admit this is not weakness, it is spiritual strength, like the monk's candle. When we stop grasping at purity and perfection, our shadow loses its grip, and peace returns. Meditative. Closing prompt tonight, before sleep, sit with a small candle. Place it in front of you. Sit in stillness. Watch the way your shadow moves. See how it shifts, how it stretches. Observe it without judgment. Then ask, what have I been afraid to face in myself? When ready, gently blow out the flame. Sit in the darkness. Feel what remains. Sometimes it is only in darkness that we finally find light, the soft, quiet kind that does not cast a shadow. And as you drift into sleep, whisper, I am not afraid of my shadow. I am ready to meet myself fully, kindly, honestly. The lamp is no longer needed. You are the light. Story 22. The Stone in the Beggar's Bowl from the Empty Boat. A Zen healing collection. I once met a man who had nothing, no home, no shoes, not even a name he cared to remember. He lived under a bridge near a train station, wrapped in layers of discarded cloth and the silence of 1,000 strangers walking past. Each morning, he would sit cross-legged with a wooden bowl in front of him. He didn't beg, he didn't call out. He simply waited. One morning, I brought him tea. He looked at me, then looked down at the bowl between us. Inside, there was only a smooth, round stone. I asked, gently, why a stone? He smiled, toothless and bright. It reminds me that even when the bowl is empty, it is full. I didn't understand then, but something about his presence, so calm, so whole, lingered like the aftertaste of incense. Years later, when my own life fell apart, business lost, marriage shattered, my identity scattered across court papers and cardboard boxes, I remembered the man and the stone so. I sat, I picked up a bowl, and I placed a stone inside it. That was the beginning of something I could not yet name. Zen Parablin, a small Zen village. A young monk was sent on pilgrimage by his master with only a begging bowl and the clothes on his back. Take nothing else, the master said, except a single stone. The monk was confused, but obeyed. For days he walked, begged, sat, walked again. Some days his bowl filled with rice or tea. Other days it remained empty. In time, hunger turned to anger. What use is this stone? He shouted one night, tossing it far into a river. Suddenly he felt panic. He ran to the riverbank, searching through mud and reeds. He found it caked in silk, cold in his hand, and clutched it to his chest. He wept that night, Under moonlight, he whispered, the stone reminds me, it is not what fills the bowl that matters, but how I hold it. Philosophical reflection, what? Is emptiness? Is it lack? Loss? Is it failure? Shame? Or could it be something more? Something deeper? In Buddhism, Nyat, often translated as emptiness, is not nihilism. It is not nothingness. It is the understanding that all things are empty of a fixed, independent self. Like the bowl, we too are containers of thoughts, emotions, experiences. But we are not those contents. We are the space that holds them. When we cling to gain and fear loss, we forget this. We identify with what we have. But what we have is not what we are. The beggar with the stone understood something. Most of us don't. That to sit in emptiness and still smile is the highest form of wealth. Psychological reflection in modern psychology. We often frame fulfillment in terms of having a stable income, having a family, having success, status, love. But what happens when these are taken away? Many people come to therapy when life empties them, not because they are weak, but because they were never taught how to sit with nothing. But here's the truth. There is power in the pause, healing in the space between stories. We call it liminal space, the in-between, the unknown, and it is in this space, this emptiness, that we grow. The stone in the bowl is symbolic of anchoring ourselves. It is not there to fill, it is there to ground. When we lose everything, we begin to see what remains, and often what remains is peace. Meditative closing prompt tonight. Find a small bowl, place it in front of you. If you can, find a smooth stone. If not, imagine one. Sit. Watch the bowl. Let your breath settle. Ask yourself, what am I trying to fill my life with? And what remains when I stop? Now, imagine yourself placing the stone in the bowl. Let that act mean, I am enough, even in emptiness, especially in emptiness. Let this be your mantra. I am the bowl. I am the space. I am not broken. I am whole. When you are ready to sleep, leave the bowl by your bedside. May you carry its silence into your dreams. And may you wake, not full, but whole. Story 23. The feather on the well from the empty boat. A Zen healing collection. A monk once told me, if you want to hear the voice of heaven, listen to a feather landing on water. I didn't understand. How could something so silent make a sound? But then again, maybe the point was not the sound. Maybe the point was the listening dot in the southern hills of Kyoto. Long before the cities became glass and neon, there stood an old well hidden behind a tattered shrine. Beside the well was a tree, and in the tree lived a white heron. The villagers believed that this heron was no ordinary bird, but the reincarnation of a young girl who once lived in the village. A girl who had waited by the well every day for her father to return from war, never knowing that he had perished far from home. She waited until her last breath, and after she died, the legend said, she came back as a heron, waiting still. Every now and then, someone would pass by and see the bird watching the water. They would speak, they would pray, they would even weep. But the heron never responded, until one day a feather fell from her wing and landed in the well. And that, they said, was the moment the past was released. Zen parable. A young disciple came to Master Benkei with grief in her chest. She had lost her mother suddenly. No farewell, no parting words, just silence. I never got to say, I'm sorry, she whispered. Benke, I said nothing. Instead, he led her down the mountain to a small stone well. Speak into the well, he said. She looked puzzled. Why? Because it has never forgotten how to listen, so she knelt. And she spoke about regrets, about love never said, about apologies, too late. She wept. Her tears fell into the water when she finished. Benkei handed her a feather. Place it on the surface, he instructed. She did. The feather floated silently. Benkei bowed and said, Now, let the past rest where it belongs. And they walked back in silence. Philosophical reflection. So often we confuse grief with memory. We hold on, thinking that forgetting is betrayal. But Buddhism teaches impermanence, anicca. All things arise and pass. To cling to what has gone is to deny the truth of life itself. The well in our story is the mind. It holds reflection still and deep. The feather is the past light, beautiful, but not meant to sink into us. To heal, we do not erase what happened. We place it gently where it belongs, in memory, not in bondage. As Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, if you touch the present moment deeply, you touch the past and the future as well. The heron, watching the water, is each of us, longing, remembering, waiting for peace. And peace comes not when the past is corrected, but when it is accepted. Psychological reflection. Grief is not linear. It does not move in straight lines or tidy timelines. Psychologists speak of complicated grief when mourning becomes a prison rather than a passage. We replay scenes. We rewrite conversations in our heads. We try to finish what was left undone, but the truth is, the past does not need fixing. It needs releasing. Therapy often teaches ritual closure, writing a letter never sent, having a dialogue with someone who is no longer here. This may seem strange. The brain responds to symbolism, to sacred gestures. The feather on the well is one such ritual. It says, I have spoken. I have remembered. Now I let this be. Grief is not about forgetting. It is about no longer drowning, and a single feather can remind us that healing need not be heavy. Meditative closing prompt in night. Close your eyes. Imagine a stone well before you, still, silent, sacred. Imagine kneeling beside it. Whisper into the well the name of someone you've lost, or something you never said. Let your breath carry your truth into the stillness. Now, imagine holding a feather, soft, white light. Place it gently on the surface of the water and whisper, may you rest, may I rest, may all things find peace. Stay here in this image as long as you need. When you're ready, return. But carry the silence with you. You are not alone. You have not forgotten. You have simply let go. Story 24. The Beggar with No Bowl from the Empty Boat, a Zen healing collection in the oldest corner of the village market, where the stones were worn smooth from centuries of footsteps, sat a man who was known to all and understood by none. He never begged. He never spoke. He sat every morning on the edge of the well where the vendors gathered to shout their prices and show off their produce. But unlike the others who knelt for coins or called out for pity, this man had nothing in front of him, no bowl, no cup, not even a hand outstretched. And yet every day people left things beside him, not because he asked, but because he didn't. They called him the beggar with no bowl. He never acknowledged the gifts. He simply sat, sometimes with his eyes closed, sometimes watching the clouds, sometimes watching nothing at all. When asked who he was, no one knew. He had simply appeared one morning years ago and never left. And Though some mocked him, most didn't. There was something peaceful about his presence, like a tree in the middle of chaos. It was said that once a wealthy merchant had asked him, "Old man, what do you want?" And the beggar had replied only, "I already have it." Zen parable: a young monk complained to his teacher, "Master, I am tired of needing so much. I want to be free of desire." The master smiled, "Then give away all you own." The monk nodded. He gave his robes to the poor, his books to the temple, his cushion to another student. He returned to the master, shivering. "I have nothing left." The master pointed to the ground. "You still want my approval. That's something." The monk frowned. "You still want peace. That too is something." The monk's face dropped. "You still want to stop wanting. That is also wanting." The monk bowed, tears in his eyes. "Then what should I do?" The master touched his shoulder. "Sit like the beggar who has no bowl. Don't ask, don't force. Let wanting rise, let wanting fall, but you just sit." Philosophical reflection in Buddhism: desire tanha is one of the root causes of suffering. But the path is not about suppressing desire violently. It is about understanding it, watching it, letting it pass like a wave. The beggar with no bowl becomes a symbol. He has no vessel, because he is no longer trying to contain anything. He is not asking the world to give him more. He is simply present, not out of laziness, but out of knowing that wholeness cannot be begged for. Zen teaches, "When I seek nothing, I find everything." So many of us think peace will come when we get that raise, that recognition, that relationship. But then it arrives, and we're still restless, because the bowl is still out, still open, still expecting. Freedom begins the moment we set the bowl down and just breathe. Psychological reflection. In modern psychology, there is a term, hedonic treadmill. It refers to our tendency to quickly adapt to new gains, only to want more. You get the promotion and then crave the next. You meet someone and then fear losing them. You buy the new phone and grow bored in weeks. This constant cycle of craving and dissatisfaction is exhausting. The beggar with no bowl breaks that cycle, not by achieving all his goals, but by ceasing to measure life through the lens of gain and lack. Many therapists now promote mindful acceptance, acknowledging thoughts and desires without needing to fix them. You may still want, you may still long, but you are not enslaved. You are watching, like the beggar who watches clouds pass. True abundance is not getting everything. It is needing less. Meditative closing prompt in night. Sit quietly. Place your hands in your lap. Imagine there is no bowl. Nothing you must receive. Nothing you must grasp. Say quietly, "I do not need to be more. I do not need to be elsewhere. This moment is enough." Now observe your thoughts. Desire may rise, a memory, a wish, a craving. Don't suppress them. Simply see them, like clouds drifting by, and return to the breath. Inhale, exhale. The bowl is gone, and what remains is peace. Story 25. The Empty Room from the Empty Boat, a Zen healing collection. There was a house, tucked behind the rice fields, far from any road. It was not large, nor grand. Its wooden beams creaked. Its windows sang when the wind passed through. And its most curious feature was a room that no one used. The room had no furniture, no decorations, no color. It was simply empty, and yet the family who lived there, a mother, father, and daughter, refused to enter it. They walked past it, avoided it, never opened its sliding door, as if something unspeakable lived inside. When asked, the mother would say, "It's the room where everything fell apart." But she never said more. Years passed. The daughter, whose name was Anne, grew older. She asked again and again about the empty room, but no answer ever came, until one autumn, after her father died, and grief hung over the house like smoke, Anne went to the door. She opened it. The air inside was dry, still faintly sweet, like dust and old paper. She stepped in. She sat in the center of the empty room, and she wept, not loudly, not with drama, just weeping. Years of questions, silence, and wounds passed through her in that space. She stayed until evening. Then she stood, bowed to the room, and left. That night, her mother came to her quietly. "You went inside." She whispered. Anne nodded. The old woman stared at her, then looked away. "When you were born," she said, "we kept all your things in that room, your cradle, your clothes, our hopes." She paused. "And when your brother died in that same room, I couldn't bear to touch it again." Anne's breath caught. She had never known she had a brother. That room held everything I feared, everything I lost. She looked into her daughter's eyes, until now, and slowly, hand in hand, they returned to the room. Together, Zen Parabole monk once sought his master's permission to move into the mountains, to live alone and meditate. The master asked, "What will you do there?" "I will empty myself." The monk said, "Of anger, pain, attachment, and thought." The master nodded. Weeks passed. One day, the monk returned, frustrated. "Master, I sit in stillness, yet my mind races. I live in silence, yet memories scream. I try to empty myself, but it only reveals more." The master served him tea. As he poured, he said, "You cannot empty yourself until you first enter the room you've locked from within." Philosophical reflection. This story is not about a room in a house. It is about the room inside all of us, the one we avoid, the one that holds our grief, our losses, our unspoken memories. In Buddhism, dukkha, suffering, is not just about pain. It is about resistance to pain. Like a wound we never clean, a sorrow we never name festers. Zen does not teach us to run from sorrow. It teaches us to sit with it, to enter the room, to bow to the ghosts, and find that they are no longer ghosts, only echoes. When we stop turning away, the darkness softens. When we touch what hurts, healing begins. Psychological reflection. Modern trauma therapy speaks of integration, not forgetting pain, but welcoming it into awareness, without judgment. Many people construct inner rooms where they store hurtful memories, childhood wounds, shame, grief, unfinished goodbyes. These compartments protect us at first, but over time they imprison us. Healing begins the moment we open the door, just as Anne sat in the empty room. We too must sit with the parts of ourselves we have exiled, not to fix them, not to erase them, but to say, with compassion, "I see. You belong." The act of presence is, in itself, transformation. Meditative closing prompting it. Close your eyes. Picture a room within you. It may be dim, dusty, long sealed, but gently. Approach the door. Breathe. Open it. You may see a memory, a face, a feeling. Do not run. Do not label. Just be present. Place a hand on your heart and say softly, "This, too, is part of me. This, too, I welcome home." Let silence embrace what words cannot. Stay, breathe, be whole. And now, dear traveler of the inner world, you have reached the end of the empty boat 20-5 stories. 25 silent ripples on the water of your heart. Each tale, though born from silence, was written for you, for the moments when you feel lost, for the nights you cannot sleep, for the grief that has no name, for the questions that words cannot answer. If any of these stories touched something in you, a memory, a stillness, a letting go, let us know your thoughts, your reflections, your presence. They matter here. Please leave a comment below, share what stayed with you, or simply type one word, the one that lingered in your chest after listening. And if you feel this space has offered you warmth, gentleness, or a sense of quiet companionship, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, The Empty Boat. Here, we drift not to escape, but to remember that peace is not found by reaching, but by returning. May your heart be soft, your breath steady, and your journey ever inward, until we meet again. May you float gently in an empty boat.